All, we call this meeting to order. Mr. Chandler, thank you for sitting in for Mr. Leahy today, and if we can proceed with the city manager's briefings.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and members of council. The first item that we have under the city manager's briefing would be the public health and safety update, and I'd like to recognize Aaron Sutton, who is our director of the Virginia Beach Office of Emergency Management.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you all again, Council, Mayor, thank you. I spoke with you Thursday on an update, so just a few new items and some restatement of some things that you all are very well aware of. So for the Virginia Department of Health update, there are 66,740 cumulative confirmed cases in Virginia with 1,881 deaths. For Virginia Beach, today we have 1,455 reported cases. That's up 63 cases from yesterday. 30 COVID-related deaths at this point. This increase, this represents a 7-day average of 40 cases compared to the 11 case average at the beginning of June. The percent positivity for Virginia Beach has increased. When I saw you on Thursday, it was 3.1. Today is 5.4. The state is still reporting a 6% 7-day average of positivity, and the fatality rate still remains steady at 2%. And currently, city staff, we have a cumulative total of 28 since March who have tested positive. Outbreaks in Virginia Beach are up to 28 with 173 cases and 87 of those being healthcare workers. We are seeing an increase in congregate facilities, meaning restaurants, businesses versus the long-term care facilities that we saw in the beginning of COVID. The trend of an increase in the number of positive tests for coronavirus as among residents in the ages younger than 30 years continued through the weekend. As reported last week, since May, COVID-19 cases among ages younger than 20 have increased 240%, and cases in ages 20 to 29 have increased nearly 250%. Case investigators continue to report histories among young adults and teenagers of participation in activities that involve large gatherings of people and not wearing face coverings. These gatherings include exposures at local bars, family celebrations, and socialization with friends. Investigators are also reporting a disturbing trend of cases not providing names of close contacts so that contacts can be notified, and some being uncooperative in agreeing to participate in monitoring. As the health department discovers small clusters of positive employees in local businesses, these are investigated and followed up closely to provide guidance on cleaning and management of employees. All businesses, especially those hosting crowds, such as bars and restaurants, are reminded to follow the governor's executive orders and the associated guidelines for safe operations. The complaints and responses continue to increase with our restaurant and bar population of not following the rules. Quick update on city recovery. Reopening plans continue to be submitted and reviewed by our work group. Yesterday we met and reviewed Housing and Neighborhood Preservation, City Attorney's Office, Communications Office, and the Virginia Beach Fire Department. All were approved and will be moving forward. As of yesterday, additional recreation centers have opened, and we are currently working with them to continue to expand their programs and services that are offered. To date, we have received, we have 4 currently under review for our meeting next week, 20 that are approved, and still awaiting 11 submissions. Logistics demobilization. Over the next 30 days, we will be working to transition our PPE ordering back to the departments. We will continue to work towards having 6 months of key PPE items on hand as we look at a second wave and flu season. The demobilization comes as we look towards hurricane season and making sure that we are prepared for that as well. The return of special events and sports tournaments are currently being reviewed by stakeholders in the city. We have an outstanding special events task force that's been in place for a number of years that is working diligently to support our events and has been since day one. It is hurricane season. We are looking at a tropical disturbance coming up from Georgia. While it will not probably be a significant tropical event, it will be dumping quite a bit of rain for the later part of the week and through the weekend. So it's an opportune time to remind everybody to prepare now. We've already gone through E in our hurricanes. It's time to make sure your plans are in place. Make sure that you've reviewed your sheltering in place or evacuation plans, and that you're working on building your kit to be prepared to include the COVID-19 items that you may need, such as masks, disinfectant, sanitizers. And a reminder that vbgov.com, FEMA.gov, and knowyourzoneva.org are all great resources for folks to be able to plan. And as I end, I want to remind everyone, parents, young adults, and teens are encouraged to remain vigilant in taking the following precautions: avoiding large gatherings of people and sharing living spaces with people outside your immediate household. Practice social distancing. Wear your face cover over the nose and mouth when in public, particularly when you are indoors. Wash your hands frequently. Use hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol when soap and water is not available. Stay home when you're sick. Avoid close contact with people who are sick, including in your home. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Clean and disinfect touch surfaces frequently. Cover your coughs and sneezes when not wearing face coverings. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Rosemary, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Aaron. It is concerning to see our numbers going up and that people are not adhering to the social distancing. What I would like to know is, what about hospitalizations? Because that's really critical on whether we're able to handle this influx of new cases.
That is one of the, I guess, pluses of the population. The current population that's being affected by COVID-19 is a fairly healthy population with very few underlying medical conditions. So what we've seen is them contracting COVID and being down for the count for several days and recuperating. So hospitalizations have remained in a steady state or actually decreased, as well as the number of deaths.
Because I've been told that if the hospitalizations go up, then they will start to discontinue the elective surgeries, which people are going to really need.
Correct. That is a key indicator that is constantly monitored on a daily basis. If you look at some of our states to the south that are dealing with these increased numbers, you'd see things like Miami-Dade County looking at an 88% increase in hospitalizations and 120% increase in ventilators. We are not in that position at this point.
Thank you so much for your excellent report.
Mr. Wood.
Thank you. And I realize that there's little that can be done, and I know Dr. Lindsay isn't here today to talk about this one particular aspect of it, but kind of following on a little bit what Ms. Wilson said, you know, there's constantly people that aren't wearing masks in stores and places like that. I understand there's HIPAA regulations and things like that, but when you see a group of people come in, you know, it's just hard to believe that everybody in that one particular group is, you know, suffers from a malady that does not allow that. And I realize people can call and complain and that sort of thing, but it doesn't seem like it does any good whatsoever. Is there, and maybe you could ask her and get the information to us, is there anything that they're doing proactively to do this? Are they in fact responding to these complaints, or are they not? And
they are spending a large amount of time in our restaurant community that seems to get the largest number of complaints, the business community shortly behind that. Businesses, some are extremely compliant. Some have decided for recommendations versus requirements, and so they're not enforcing it. But at the end of the day, the Virginia Department of Health is working as diligently as they can to educate, provide guidance, and work towards compliance as best as possible.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Moss?
I'd like to, thank you for your report. When you talked about the increase among the people under 20, is that like 20 to 5, 20 to 16? What's the lower boundary of that number?
I'll have to double check, but I think it's 5 to under 20, but I will double check that for you, sir.
Well, that gets back to my next question, because clearly a lot of our economic response and ability of our economy to return to normal is when our educational system can return to normal because of the whatever they do increases greatly, employment things, opportunity. So these kind of numbers, I'm certain, I realize the school's still dealing with that issue, but I hope that they are buying supplies looking forward, because they got to buy supplies for 68,000 students and about 14,000 employees, and that's a lot of stuff to have on hand, a lot of consumables. So at the appropriate time, when it'd be great to have them, Mr. Mayor, come and that's the decision they have to come to, and I'm not trying to challenge that, but all I do know is what they decide, what's best for the kids, will have a tremendous impact on just how our economy overall performs. So I just, when I see that kind of number, that tells me that's a number they see too. That means that they're dealing with that same kind of, they might not get really sick, but those older bus drivers and those older teachers can get really sick. So it's a real challenge. So I don't know if you're communicating with them.
Very much
but,
so.
I appreciate it, but thank you. If you can tell me what that age, that'd be great.
Yes,
at a
I
later
will.
date. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Wooten?
Good afternoon, Ms. Sutton. I am following up on a update from Thursday regarding the sports tournament draft plan that you have. Do you have any more information on that, when that plan will be available?
Our special events task force, we're working through it this week. We have we're working on a draft. The biggest issue being we want to make sure that we have a COVID-19 mitigation plan that comes with tournaments that want to return to our city. So we've been actively working with our special events task force as they work through the permitting process. So once we have that document, we will make sure to share that with everyone.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to call on Deputy City Manager Steve Cover for Public Safety.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. I'm just going to take just a couple minutes to follow up on our Thursday meeting. As you all are well aware, we had a holiday weekend this past weekend, July 4th. It was a busy weekend for us. We had wonderful weather. We had fairly large crowds, especially at our beachfront areas. And we did the public safety portfolio did much planning and preparation to be able to safely navigate through this weekend for both our citizens that live here year-round and our visitors. All of the public safety departments upstaffed for the weekend: police, the sheriff, fire department, EMS, our 911, ECCS center, and emergency management all came together during the planning and preparation phase. Shout out to the city attorney and the Commonwealth attorney, who were also available, especially to Chief Zucchero and his staff over the weekend as plans changed and more information became available to us. I couldn't be prouder of how our police department interacted with our visitors at the oceanfront especially, and the guests that came out for the weekend there. It was good to see. They followed the strategy, the overall strategy, the overarching strategy that Chief Zucchero has spoken to before. that's being fair, firm, and friendly to those involved that are out trying to enjoy our beach and have a good time. Also want to talk about our traffic planning. I know probably some of you got some calls because we did reverse flow, turn around the traffic at the foot of 264. So we apologize for that inconvenience, but as we have done in past years, as public safety gets to the point that we feel like public safety is compromised in the oceanfront area because of the volume of traffic, we enact that plan. And thanks to the police department, they put some 60 individuals into that process, along with help from the state police and the sheriff's department. I want to quickly touch on fireworks. Fireworks, if you stepped outside over the weekend, I'm sure you heard fireworks. And I want to remind our viewing public that fireworks are illegal in our city. I know people have been held up in their houses due to the pandemic and wanted to get out and celebrate, but just realize that they are dangerous. We did have one fairly serious injury over the weekend as a result of fireworks. The other point I want to hit on is people firing weapons into the air, during celebrations, and that lead bullet has to come down somewhere. And we did have a couple cases where some individuals had bullets ricochet and fall quite close to them. One, in fact, Chief, I hope I'm not talking out of school here. One actually struck a police car, the roof of a police car that was traveling down 264. So I just remind people to refrain from firing ammunition into the air. Moving on into Saturday evening, we had a march of protest. I'd like to thank Councilman Rouse and the interim police chief. Myself and several others met with the organizers of that event. We agreed to a route that was amenable to all parties, that we felt like put public safety at the forefront. And as it turned out, it was a peaceful protest, and there were no real acts of violence that were there. And I'd like to take a moment to publicly thank the organizers, Black Lives Matter 757, for coming to the table with us and attempting and working as hard as they did on their end to make it peaceful as well. I want to again thank all of our public safety departments for the work they did over the weekend. PD had the lead on it, obviously, but everybody pitched in. I want to thank several members of council that came out over the weekend that I was aware of. And if I miss anybody, please speak up. But I know the mayor and the vice mayor were out, Councilman Rouse, Councilman Berlucci, and as I mentioned, Councilman Rouse. So with that, the chief is here with staff. If any of you have any questions that we can
I believe
answer.
Mr. Moss was also out there.
I did say Mr. Moss, I
Oh,
thought.
okay.
You said Rouse twice.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Moss was out there.
You deserve it.
Thank you.
I had you on my notes, Mr. Moss. That makes a difference.
I wasn't down there looking for.
Okay. Ms. Wilson?
I'm so proud of our public safety and how everything was handled Saturday, and I was in communication with the chief to let him know, and I thought that the bicycles was just a brilliant way to say in a friendly way, you're not going to go down the street, and it just worked out really, really well. And just want to thank you for everything that you did. I don't know if there's a way we can do this when we're going to be closing the streets, if we can send out a communication through our alert system to let people know. I did get some phone calls of people who were adversely affected by it, and then were an elderly lady that really got upset, and it really.
Part of the issue, Council Lady, is that we don't know exactly when that time is going to be. We can try to do reverse 911, but that's not going to affect the people, the people that are on the road that are visitors. It's going to be hard for them to get that message. So
No.
it's driven by the flow in and the congestion.
Well, whatever we can do to help improve that would be great.
And we did, as the chief just reminded me, we did do an advance news release to let people know that that was probably going to happen as
Yeah.
well.
And anyway, it is what it is, but I think, given the circumstances, I'm so proud of what y'all have done, and always proud every day of how great our public safety is, and you just do a fabulous job, and thank you, because I know it's not easy times right now.
Mr. Wood?
Thanks. And I certainly echo what Ms. Wilson said about the level of professionalism. I was very impressed with the way that all the public safety, but specifically the police department, handled themselves on this. I know it was tricky going back and forth with the organizers changing everything, and the fact that you were able to effectively force the correct decision was good. And it's also gratifying, frankly, to see that the millions of dollars we put into this oceanfront surveillance system works very well. I mean, it truly does, and also the fact that the drones, clearly a lot cheaper to operate than helicopters and can stay up for a while, and I mean, that's really good. It's a really good force multiplier. We're able to see, frankly, somebody stole a bike, and, completely unrelated to this, and we observed the entire process where they followed the guy on the bike with the drone until officers came, and they jumped on him and got him, and that was really good. But following also on another thing that Ms. Wilson said, I don't know, it might not be the same person who called her, but there was an 86-year-old woman who was going from Hilltop to the North End, and she was rerouted and ended up on General Booth Boulevard. And she couldn't figure out how to get there. She asked the police officer at the intersection what was the best route. He was a Chesapeake police officer who we were using. I know we had 28 Chesapeake officers there. He said, "Ma'am, I don't know, I'm from Chesapeake," which probably isn't the best thing to do. Is there a process in place where if somebody has an ID and says, "I live over here," can they go, or are we still routing them all over the place? Because ultimately she had to get her daughter to come pick her up because she was completely lost.
And shaken.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Wood, the answer is there is a process, but it depends on the nature of the traffic diversion. If it's a hard divert, then even the residents are going to be deferred for a little while. But if it's one where we can navigate, allowing the residents as well as the hotel guests to go, we typically do that. Because of the size, scope, and the amount of resources that we needed for July 4th, based on the announcement of the demonstration, I did activate mutual aid, and as you mentioned, we had some officers from Chesapeake as well as the state police and the sheriff contributed quite a number. So we try to work through that as best we can.
Yeah, it's just if there's a way, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sure.
There's a method where particularly vulnerable people, like an elderly woman who doesn't drive very well at night to begin with and gets shuttled off to a part of the city she's not familiar with and panics and has to call her family. If there's just, and I realize they weren't your officers particularly that did that, but I think there's probably a better way to handle that if you could maybe kind of plug that in next time.
Sure, that's would be an opportunity for us to insert that into the messaging with our staff. We also had support from our Peninsula friends in Hampton and PD and Newport News PD that were ready to come assist us, as well as Portsmouth. So we'll look at how to better message that for our partner agencies.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Ms. Wooten? Oh, Mr. Roush and then Ms. Wooten.
No.
Okay.
Well, mine is very brief. Very briefly, I was out there on Friday evening, had a chance to kind of, view and see the police presence out there and to see the families out there walking. Things seemed to be very peaceful, very calm. And so I was glad to see, all that was happening on that day. And just wanted to say thank you. I'm glad to hear that things went very well on Saturday, and it was a peaceful protest.
Sorry I didn't give you a shout out. I didn't see you there.
wouldn't have
so.
seen- I was incognito.
Thank
You
you.
wouldn't have seen. It's okay.
Okay, Mr. Rouse.
I want to thank the organizers from Black Lives Matters for coming to the table and sitting down with Chief Carl, and thank Chief Carl and all his officers for their professionalism and, I mean, just outstanding work on Saturday. I think it really shows when both parties can come together for the benefit of our community and for humanity. It shows that there's work to be done, but it shows a pathway forward. And I couldn't be more proud of everyone involved to make sure that not only the visitors, but the protesters, everyone was safe. And my hat's off to Steve Cover and Chief Sakaro again, and the organizers of the rally. I couldn't ask for a better turnout, and thank you for everyone for coming to the table with an open mind. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Good stuff.
Thank you, sir.
Chief Sakaro?
Thank you, Mr. Chandler, Mr. Cover. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's a pleasure to be here today. Say again? So can I pause for a minute and see if we can get it loaded up?
We're going to have you come up as the sheriff.
Okay.
So that'll give us
I
a second.
apologize. Apparently our PowerPoint didn't make it to the link.
I'd like to recognize Sheriff Stawley. Just wait to the podium. Council members may be familiar with a court security fee that we're allowed to levy. That fee is currently $10. The last session of the General Assembly has authorized localities to actually raise that fee to $20. And you have a request from Sheriff Stawley for that consideration and a presentation on that measure as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chandler.
Welcome, Sheriff Stolly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the City Council for what they did this last weekend at a time when the public seems to be vilifying police officers and law enforcement officers. The City Council stood up with the law enforcement and said, this is our city, and you're not going to take it, you're not going to do things bad here. And the police department executed a great plan. Tony Zuccaro deserves a lot of credit, and they worked with the people, and it turned out peaceful. But as far as I know, this is the first local government that has stood up and said, this is our town, and we're not going to do this, and we're not going to turn things over to people that shouldn't be in charge and things of that nature. So I want to thank you for doing that, and I want to thank Tony Zuccaro for what he did and the police department did. And I think they did a great job, and I think they deserve a lot of credit. And I was happy to be part of it. But the second thing I'd like to talk to you about is more than one council member has told me they hate to see me come because it always costs them money. But I think that today I'm trying to give you money, and I think that Mr. Moss has written a number of questions in an email that he wanted answered. And I think that I'll try and answer those questions as best I can. For fiscal year 20, we have a $5.3 million budget for courthouse security. And for 19, we had a $5.1 million budget for courthouse security. I passed out a revenue chart to show you all this money, but revenues received from the comp board related to courthouse personnel was $1.1 million. Revenues generated from other fees charged in courts, about $1.3 million, and that's local rentals, locker rentals, sheriff's fees. As the high constable, I get to keep the money that we get have service of process, and court security. We have an average of about $500,000 a year for the fund that we currently have. The revenue from the city to cover the operation of the courthouse is $2.9 million, and we started monitoring, do video monitoring and video trials over the last 3 months to get some of the backlog out of the way, and to continue doing that, it's going to be about $5,000 each month or each week, and about $30,000 a month, and it's going to cost 6 deputies about $30,000 a month to continue the video arraignments. And we're talking about video arraignments, video trials, guilty pleas, bond hearings, and determination of counsel, all going on video arraignments to stop people from moving back and forth. And I think that should answer most of Mr. Moss's questions. If not, I will say that none of that matters. None of this matters at all, what I just said, because the purpose behind this fee is to find money for the cities that the state has authorized. And in fact, when it was this city council, or the city council back in 2007, they came to me and asked me to increase the fee from $5 to $10, and I arranged for that to happen on Senate Finance. But it's, you know, you all have complained all along that the state's not paying its fair share, and this is one of the ways that the state is going to pay its fair share. They're not going to give you the revenue streams that they have, so they have to come up with additional revenue streams, and this is one of the revenue streams they've come up with to try and fulfill their promise to us to gather more money for the cost of state operations. And so, Jimmy, I don't know if you have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Wood.
I do. So it's currently $5?
No, it's $10. It was $5 when I went to Richmond. I changed it. We changed it to $10 in 2007.
And then it will be, if this
$20.
$20. And who is that assessed against?
Pardon? It's assessed against anybody that is convicted of a criminal charge or a traffic violation in the Virginia Beach courts.
Okay, so it's just added on to the.
It's added on court costs. Court costs. Yeah.
So do you know roughly what court costs are for like a?
I think I want to say it's about $130 for a misdemeanor now. It's way up there.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know you know the point of the matter is this doesn't impact my budget at all. And for you to think that I get the money is wrong. You all get the money, and it's money that is available for you if you want it. And you know you're paying $2.9 million now. This above what the state gives me, and you could get probably close to $500,000 or $400,000. This year's an off year because we suspended the course for a long period of time. But it's about $500,000 a year that you can get that supplant, and you can supplant the money that you're giving us with that money. And so I don't know why you'd not want to take advantage of this money. You know, you've been asking all along since while I was in Richmond, and since I've been sheriff, to try and get the state to pay more of its fair share for the public safety. And now you have an opportunity, and I don't understand why you wouldn't want to take advantage of that.
So if I just want to continue. So it's people have to be convicted.
Pardon me?
People have to be convicted.
They have to be convicted, yeah. There's a user fee. Some people call it user fees.
Okay. And then I assume that this trend line is based on the number of convictions as they go up and down. That's where.
It's based on the convictions, also based on the pay. You know, in Virginia, the people that pay their fines and costs has gone down dramatically over the last several years, and that's part of the loss, the lost revenue right there. And some of the arrests have gone down as well. And so I think that it's both of those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Moss.
Yeah, I have a number of questions. And I always think that people have the first right to their money, and just because we have an opportunity, a legal opportunity to confiscate more of their revenues, if there's not a legitimate requirement, we shouldn't be doing it. Secondly, I didn't see in our package an offsetting revenue where we were going to be decreasing the money to the court systems in our budget because of the revenue this fine would produce. So if that was supposed to come from the city staff, we didn't get that. But I accept your offer, if this is adopted, to go back and recoup the revenues to the general fund. But it is interesting, and I want to get back to what's causing this, because if you look across this graph and you look at what was budgeted across all those years, I couldn't find a rhyme or reason or pattern to the budget numbers relative to what is the requirement for the money. Because ultimately, it should be the requirement of the money that we are funding, not just a budget. And if you look at the amount that we raise, which gets back to the point of we obviously have fewer people paying, and they're paying smaller fines, so you're right on spot there, Sheriff Hawley. Because when it was $5, we collected $394,953, 953, right? So in 20, when the fee is double, we actually collected less than when it was $5.
That's right.
Which does convert to either one, there's less being done, less volume, and obviously less, that would reduce those money down. But if you also look that in 18, the requirement was 570, that's what your budget was, you said that was the requirement. Well, we were short by $82,985. I guess the other money that we provide makes up for that, the 2.9 or the state, or you cut your cost, but somehow that happened. And 19 and 20, which I assume 20 is the year that just ended 30 June, correct?
Yeah.
The budget was the same. Now, I don't know about everybody, but usually budgets, when you see flat numbers and always end in zero, that probably is an indicator of lack of rigor in the actual number generated. But that aside, it's what is the real deficit between what you are collecting or expect to collect in 21 and what you actually need to meet the expense that you budget for?
Well, I think that there's two issues there, Mr. Moss. I think the first issue is, who do you want to pay for it? And if the state gives you a revenue stream, do you want to take advantage of that revenue stream? The second issue is, can we justify the expenditure? And I agree with you. I think that we need to justify all the expenditures that we make. But I can tell you that I have basically the same number of deputies I had 10 years ago. And I think that, you know, with the COVID-19 virus and other things that are going on, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to provide these additional services that we've not provided in the past. Like it's going to take me 5 deputies to do the Polycom, and which is a approved video system by the Supreme Court that you can use to have trials and bond hearings and DCs and stuff like that. And so I think, and that's going to cost me 5 additional people. This money came in after we did the budget this year. So the General Assembly did this after we did the budget. So that's why I don't think you see a lot of things in the budget. This is money that came up after the General Assembly, or at the end of the General Assembly session.
Well, let's walk that back. Are you getting 5 additional FTEs from the State Compensation Board for the Polygon?
No, we're not.
So you're going to come to the city manager and ask for 5 positions paid fully by the city budget using this fee?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we've got additional expenditures that we have to deal with, and we recognize that the city is in a difficult spot right now, but we have expenditures that we have to deal with.
I'm with you. So if you take the number you collected, 330, we'll say $340,000
Right.
at 10, and assuming that FY20 was in fact impacted somewhat by the courts being closed. So if you take the average of 17, 18, and 19, the average of the money you collected, that would be $455,932.
Right.
Right? So if you make some number, and obviously if you double that number, it would be $900,000, which is obviously more than what I think we would, that'd be about a 33% increase in the amount of money, which would be pretty big for a one-year jump. So what I'm really asking is, I understand we have the authority to raise it to 20, but unless someone is telling me that we are going to raise it to 20, and the delta between what that raises and what you really need as a requirement in 20, which we haven't, in 21, which we haven't seen any paperwork with regards to that the city manager is going to come back and ask us to reallocate that delta out of the $2.9 million from the city and put it back in the general fund reserve. We've actually put a huge increase in your revenue stream, but with no identified expenditures for which that money would be used. I don't see an expenditure sheet here. I see what we spent, but I don't see what is the requirement for more than doubling this year's expense, and basically probably about 60% doubling your average that you collected between 17 and 19. So it isn't about the legitimacy that you need money. It's about us, since we're going to make people pay it, that we can legitimately tell people what the money is going to pay for or what contribution from the city it's going to reduce. And I don't see that information here today.
Well, maybe I can help you a little bit.
Please do.
I think that the acknowledgement by the General Assembly is that they've been underpaying their share of the court cost and the operation of the courts. And this is the way that they deal out money. And so it's based on you eat what you kill. If you have the cases in your courts, you get to keep the fees in your courts. And so I think that you're looking for something that doesn't exist.
Well, what I hear you saying is that if we raise this fee, the amount of increased revenue over that 3-year average, I don't think 20 is representative, but the amount that it raises over that 3-year average should be used to reduce the city's contribution from its funds that we take from taxpayers, not a user fee, to the courts, because the court had a budget and now we're funding it. That's all I'm after is, if we're raising money one place without a requirement for it, then it goes against meeting the state's bigger share, then the city's contribution can be reduced by a like amount.
I would agree with that. I would
Okay,
agree with that.
Then I am good. I just look forward to the next council meeting, seeing the appropriate budget adjustments coming forward for us to make.
Well, I'm not agreeing to do that. I'm just agreeing that you can do that. I'm not agreeing that I'm going to do that, because I think that the courts are going to cost more money every year to provide the security over the courts. And I think it's one of the hot spots that we have in Virginia Beach. And what I'm telling you is that the state has recognized their responsibility to put more money in the court protection system. And if you don't want the money, then you don't have to take the money. But I'm not going to agree to limit our budget to our budget request. And you ask questions in here about what basis we have for the budget and things of that nature. And I think that we go through the city for our budget. And the reason we go through the city for our budget is because there's a lot of fees that are generated, or a lot of costs that are generated that the state doesn't cover. And so this is an opportunity for the city to take advantage of this revenue and backfill what revenue they put in it, or use it for future expenditures. And so I'm not saying that we may need another magnetometer next year. We may need vests or something like that for the deputies that work the courts. And so I think that to ask me to agree to not use this money in the future is unreasonable.
Mr. Mayor, my closing comment would be this. Requirements always expand to the money being made available in government. That's just the nature of the beast. And I'm just saying is, here, we know you say you have a requirement, but we don't have that requirement. You can't tell us what that additional revenue would go to, but yet you're asking us to levy a tax, in effect, a user fee on people, sometimes the lowest income people in our community, who are often the people who find themselves not represented as well in the court system and find themselves being found guilty, to pay, but yet I can't go and tell any citizen when they pay that extra fee what specifically, what requirement, what piece of equipment, what is that money going to? And I don't know how people in a responsible system can confiscate revenue from people and not be able to offer that explanation. But maybe you can, and the voters elect us both. You have to explain it, but I know how I'm going to vote.
Okay. Mr. Jones.
Sheriff,
Yeah.
my recollection is that last year in the budget, we had agreed to help with some additional money for the clerks in the courts. And my question to you is, if there's excess money as a result of this action, would that money be available to make up that expenditure?
It would be. It would be. And the city government, the city manager just moved us to midpoints. You can use it for that as well. And so I think the deputies, I can use it for staff, or I can use it for equipment over there.
So it's all in the same fund?
Yeah.
And we could use the excess money to meet that obligation that we made, that we frankly had to back off on because of the adjustments to the budget and so forth.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
And Mr. Jones, I'd say that the way the budget works, and you all know this, is that the city budget comes out with what they're going to approve this year. And so I've got a list of things that we didn't get approved this year that we can use this money for, but you didn't have the money to approve it. And so I understand that, and we try to work with you on that. But I think that to suggest that it's not, this money can't be justified is I think, a mistake. I think it can be justified.
All right, Mr. Chandler, I think looked like you had a comment to make.
It's just a couple of points of clarification, if I may, as the sheriff is speaking. With the revenue stream, of course, we're talking about an additional revenue that could be levied effective August 1st. Remember, with the courts facility, that would be the responsibility of local government. to maintain and provide court facilities. It's normally the sheriff's responsibility to run and manage the actual facility. When we talk about the $334,000, that is in the court support services line item of his 149 fund. Remember, you give about $50 million a year to the sheriff's department. Of that, $334,000 is part of a larger number of about $5.1 million, and that is actually used for court services security. So it's not like we can levy it and use it for anything else. It's going to have to go to certain aspects of court security.
Okay. So
Mr.
we
Mayor,
can't-
I disagree with that in one aspect, Ken, and that is that you know, if you're paying more than you have, if you're paying $2.9 million, you can supplant that money and just use it for the court security. If you're paying for it now and you don't have to pay for it, you can use that money to supplant the money that you're paying for the court services now, can't you?
I don't know about supplanting. I guess my point is the bigger picture. You've got about $5.1 million to maintain your facilities.
I guess
your cost is
my point-
probably more than
I'd like
that.
to know the answer to the question, and that is whether or not, if we do this, can the excess money, if there's excess money exists, be used for the purpose that we had made a commitment for previously,
Okay.
as far as the clerks are concerned? That's what I want to know, okay?
I think.
Okay, we got somebody who might be able.
I'm sorry about
Yeah.
that. So, excuse me, Sheriff.
Kevin Chatelier.
Yes, sir.
Veteran Management Services.
Mr. Jones, the clerk supplement is in the general fund. The sheriff operates within a special revenue fund, the 149 fund. So for that to take place, if this fee were increased and then we were to reduce general fund contributions to the sheriff office, we could then redirect it to meet that need in the general fund if that was city council's desire.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay,
So-
Mr. Wood.
Yes, I mean, that's basically what the sheriff was saying. I think everybody was kind of talking crossways, is the money, you know, he's got a special fund, but if it's, if we're taking money from our general fund and putting it into his special fund to pay for the court security, now if we no longer have to put that money in, then we can use it for whatever we want. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Ms. Wilson.
And Ken, I know that so many times you look for creative ways to make the numbers work. You have a really tough job, and your men and women work really hard to try to keep peace there and keep, you know, everyone busy and doing what they need to do and generating revenue in different ways within your own facility. And you've really done an amazing job. And I've also, you know where I live. I live right on the boardwalk.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing this summer a lot of your men and women down there to help keep, you know, peace, as well as our police officers, and some planting and helping things. So just want to thank you and your men and women for all the great work you've been doing.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. That's very kind of you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, Ms. Abbott.
Thank you. Sheriff, first of all, I want to say thank you for all the hard work you're doing. I know that you and your deputies have a very challenging job, especially with the new normal of COVID. My comments aren't really directed to the sheriff. They're more to engage the body. One, kind of a general comment. I would like to see, since we're meeting regularly for the most part and we're trying to move towards a normal, more normal process, that we try to go back to our original intent of having our briefings ahead of our voting meetings. I think that we're doing a disservice to our discussion, and I would prefer to be able to have more robust discussion before something winds up on the agenda. That aside, I'm more curious as to, I'm less concerned about how the money is going to be spent in the budget and more concerned about the impact that this is going to have on the people that it's going to be levied against, being that ideal in people who have speeding tickets and how it's going to impact their insurance. Those people generally are the ones that have the least ability to pay. And I'm not saying we don't want to implement this, and I certainly don't think it's a bad idea, but I'm curious, and if this is something staff could get back to us, what is the rate that people are able to pay on time And then how many people either allow that fee, because I assume, and Sheriff, you might be able to tell me, if they don't pay their fine after they're convicted, that does steadily go up until they do?
I think there's fines and costs, and there's interest on the cost
Right.
and fines, but I think that if they're paying, they can get a two-pay and you know, pay it off over time, and I think that that's the way most of it is handled right now. And I think that you know, the General Assembly just did away with suspending somebody's license for non-payment of fines, and so I think that was a good move. Because, you know, half the people in Virginia have suspended driver's license, it seems, nowadays. But I think that, you know, I think that the courts are willing to work with them because they realize they're not the people that have a lot of money that typically get the sentences. And I appreciate your concern about the people that are, you know, in this position, but they put themselves in this position, and regardless of whether they have the money or not, it's a user fee, and if you want to pass the cost on to everybody, then you would vote against this. But if you want it to be more of a user fee than it is a tax on everybody, then I think you'd vote for this.
Sure. Well, I think it's all I think it's all worthy of discussion. I think we just have to start what we're facing in our country, in our city, in our state, all collectively, is we're having to come to terms with asking ourselves, are some of the systems and fees and fines that we have in place, are they disproportionately impacting groups of our population, and is that a fair process to continue? And so what I'm really saying is I'm challenging us to look at all of our processes as a group and say, does this disenfranchise certain groups of people in a way that is unfair and based on circumstances beyond their control? And does it prevent them from getting out of those bad circumstances and bringing them into a better place, both financially and within society? So that's more of a general comment, not necessarily very specific to this, but back to my original comment of I would really appreciate us having more robust discussion ahead of votes and moving away from the briefing in the same day again. I realize that was something we've kind of compromised on due to the circumstances of COVID, but that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Sheriff Solly.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chandler.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We'll have Chief Socorro come up now. We're going to do a presentation on Commission on Accreditation and the law enforcement agencies. This is CALEA. This is something that we have shared in a part of in terms of an accredited police department, but we're going to get a chance to share some things with you about that accreditation. That makes it pretty special for Virginia Beach for what we've achieved.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. And I need to apologize to Captain Zelms, Mr. Mayor and council members. Apparently, he did forward the PowerPoint in a timely fashion, but in my enthusiasm to present, I jumped in front of the sheriff. So here we go. So what we wanted to do is talk about the department from a higher elevation, and I wanted to start with this picture from in front of the 2nd Police Precinct. This sign was brought to the precinct by some citizens who posted this, and I think it's just a very good example of depicting our overall community support. So I think a picture speaks a volume of words. Our community profile, we have almost 450 year-round residents, with almost 60,000 of them being military members. We're the 39th largest city in the country, just over 300 square miles, with almost 70,000 students. And our Visitor and Convention Bureau tells us that we receive about 19 million visitors annually. Our department has a $106 million budget with just over 1,000 members, and we are the largest municipal police department in the state. The current member numbers reflect the budget reconciliation that was recently accomplished. Our department demographics are as depicted, with our community being about 20% African American. The totals of the minority officers equals about 17%. So I wanted to share regional information that was reported to us, and the difference between the cities demographics, and the actual staffing on the respective police departments. As you can see, Newport News and Portsmouth were unable to get with us, but just looking at the gap, while Virginia Beach, we still have work to do, our gap is the lowest of our partner agencies in the immediate area at 13.4%. I wanted to highlight our citizen satisfaction survey. This is last year, 2019 survey. As you may know, this is done by an external vendor that uses scientific analysis to complete the survey results. And last year, our general survey indicated better than 90% positive satisfaction with 88 positive score in the African American population. That was down 1 point from 92% in 2017. Violent crime's been a very topical issue here of late. I wanted to give you a snapshot in addition to what I spoke about last week. This is a snapshot of our city in the first quarter 2020 versus last year. You can see the numbers of aggravated assault are up, as well as some of the other incidents may not be as up. Robberies appear to be down, as well as the sexual assaults. So the question is, how is Virginia Beach compared to the cities of similar size throughout the country? This slide depicts some of our sister cities across the country. You can see Charlotte, North Carolina is significantly above Virginia Beach, but they're also about twice as large. But that twice as large population does not compare to the numbers that we're seeing in the aggravated assaults. Buffalo, New York is about 255 residents, and they're about 3 times what we have in Virginia Beach. So I think this slide from across the nation is very telling. We're challenged locally as well as the national conversation of recruiting qualified police officers. We have challenges on our workforce and our workforce retention. We're seeing fewer applicants participating in the hiring process. Just because you get selected into the police academy does not mean you are successful. We are experiencing about a 35% attrition rate just in the police academy. We're challenged in our diversity, in our recruiting efforts, and these are not unique to Virginia Beach. Obviously, the COVID pandemic has dramatically changed our recruiting strategies, and we're doing a lot more social media and remote engagements. So what are we doing to address it? We recently formed a recruiting task force, or a task force, looking to engage civic-minded citizens, faith-based community, as well as business community and academic community. We have a proposal for a police cadet program that is now being routed through human resources to the city manager's office. I'd like to compliment the staff from our professional development and training section that put this program proposal together. We regularly engage the historically black college and universities. We have participated in numerous social justice forums, and we partner with the LGBTQ Life Center to ensure we're a welcoming employee for all. I also have heard that there's an age barrier to joining the police department. That's not exactly right. We do have the age mandatory retirement at age 65, but that does not prohibit anyone coming in to the department. In fact, we've engaged in recruits as old as 48 or even older. Our current academy class was 28.3 years of age, and this last class we had 4 persons over the age of 40 hired. I also wanted to dispel some recruiting misconceptions. specifically about the written exam. While the numbers have decreased, I think you can see there's been some success in the African-American community, scoring with a success rate of over 94%, and the numbers are relative and speak for themselves, and that's for the written exam. So additional positive comments in our recruiting. We're going to start our next academy class. It'll be class 6-9 next week with 51 recruits being welcome. We've implemented our professional development program, formerly called the Workforce Development Program, and there's some opportunity for council in future conversations to consider funding some of those additional positions within that program, specifically the supervisors' positions. We welcome certified police officers, but remain cautious. Should we get those officers, we also have them to do a field training program, indoctrinating and properly socializing them to our organization. And we continue to provide world-class training and maintain a high reputation of our training. Our commitment to community is strong, it's vibrant, it's robust. We hold ourselves high on our department accountability. We speak of being a learning and leaning forward organization, and we strive to do community outreach and public awareness. So our program, our department is a CALEA certified department. CALEA stands for Commission of Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, and that requires us to meet at least 495 mandated certifications. We've been certified by CALEA since 1986, and out of the almost 18,000 police departments in the country, there are 731 that are certified nationally, and 138 have been awarded the accreditation with excellence. So your department has not only been awarded the accreditation with excellence, or the gold standard, we've received such ratings 4 assessments in a row. We didn't receive it. We earned a perfect score on each of those 4 assessments, and I've been told that's akin to entering the Boston Marathon, finishing the Boston Marathon at the front of the race. So that's quite an accomplishment that we're very proud of. Part of the accreditation recertification process is professionals come and meet with the community. Here are some of the comments that were received in the public comment of the accreditation recertification. Community policing at its best. Every employee understands and practices the philosophy. So for the gold standard certification, in addition to the assessor's review on our policy, training, and guidelines and written compliance, they actually go in the field and talk to our officers. The department is meticulous in seeking feedback on the community's perspective. Use of force remains a topical issue for us. We scrutinize use of force very often, literally on a daily basis. We've made arrangements several years ago to post all our general orders and field guide available online. Our protocols on use of force are some of the most stringent in the nation. We have prohibited chokeholds and neck restraints for as long as I can remember. I don't know of a time that they were ever authorized in the Virginia Beach Police Department. We have mandatory reporting on all uses of force, and any use of force that's found out of policy immediately generates an Office of Internal Affairs investigation. I'd like to share that these reviews are multi-layered. They start at the parent command with the first line supervisor, go up to the commanding officer. They're then scrutinized by the Office of Internal Affairs, as well as our professional development training for lessons learned and process improvement. So here's a closer look of accountability in action. In almost 260,000 documented encounters with a citizen, you can see that our officers used force in 0.3% of the times. Out of those encounters, we encountered or received a citizen complaint at 0.03, and complaints on use of force are 0.004. What's more important is less than 2/1000ths of 1% of those use of forces required a significant or resulted in a significant injury. And that's 7 incidents in the almost 260,000. And remember, last year, that includes the incident at Building 2. So we had some significant use of force in that incident. I also like to highlight that these are documented encounters by the police officers. They count as one transaction, 1-for-1. So if they go to a call for service, whether it's a crash or whether it's a family dispute, and there's one person or 101 persons, that's calculated as one transaction. These also don't record the transactions when the officers are on foot patrol, like you saw for the holiday weekend, or when we have them engaged in the Strawberry Festival or in Town Center. All those informal conversations and contacts are not recorded in these numbers. I've also made arrangements to post our annual use of force analysis on the department's webpage. I think that's been a recent conversation, so we wanted to lift that information, and that's publicly viewable as well. So we're a learning and leaning forward organization. I wanted to speak about our body-worn cameras. We've spoke and presented before council on the program, the funding, and the due diligence that we did. We didn't jump into the body-worn camera program initially. We studied it and we reviewed it. We decided to implement the program in 4 phases for a total of 450 officers to be equipped with the body-worn cameras. We're right now in phase 3, so you have about 330 of the officers that are assigned with a body-worn camera. As we evolved into this program, we also realized we needed to update our technology of the in-car cameras. We went from analog cameras to digital cameras. So it's quite a sizable investment to the tune of $5.5 million. Our officers assigned to the body-worn cameras wear it visibly on the police uniform. We've learned, not only from the research, but from real encounters, that the body-worn camera impacts behavior on both sides of the camera, on the front side as well as on the officer. We're looking at additional technological advancements. There are strict guidelines on the use and the activation of the body-worn cameras. Those guidelines are on the web. We solicited community comment to develop that policy, and that policy was written with the citizens' input in mind. Another critical component about the body-worn camera program that I need to highlight is no officer or supervisor in the department, except for 2 people, and I'm not even one of them, can edit or delete the video from the body-worn camera. There's a trail that's automated, and the automation trail actually can tell you who looked at it and how long they looked at it. So that's a critical piece of the integrity of the program. I wanted to speak about our use of force reporting. We call it our blue team. We also have a built-in early alert intervention program that sets predetermined thresholds to identify officers that meet certain criteria. Each use of force is required to be submitted into the blue team. It's an electronic software, so it's not hard copy. The software enables us to conduct in-depth analysis. We can identify trends and also monitor officers' actions that once they get beyond the threshold. Once there's a threshold alert, the officer's chain of command is notified, and they are required to document a formal review of those incidents that prompted that threshold alert. We have an active bystanding training. It's embedded in specifically in our use of force policy. It applies to all department members, and the bottom line, it means intervention is required when an officer believes another member is violating a policy. While we're speaking right now of use of force, it also requires the officers to intervene on performance issues, courtesy, and just general communication. Any policy violation, we're asking them to hold each other accountable. And that'll also prompt an internal investigation. In regards to use of force, in addition to some of the training protocols that we deliver, not only during the police academy, but annually during in-service, staff just identified a system called the RAP restraint system. We've recently purchased several of these items. They were a little costly, but we thought it was a good investment. We've strategically placed them throughout the department. This enables officers to restrain an individual that's already handcuffed. Oftentimes, the John Q. public thinks once the transaction of a handcuffing act is completed, that's the end of the transaction. Well, that may not be absolutely correct. Persons can still kick at us, spit at us, headbutt us. So this tool enables us to immobilize the individual, and it also significantly reduces the risk of positional asphyxiation. We've also been a leader in our crisis intervention team program. We adopted the program since 2009. It's a well-known program. We find it to be invaluable because we're able to divert persons in crisis, whether it's mental health crisis or some other crisis, away from the criminal justice system. We have one of the largest CIT programs in the state. We've partnered with Human Services to now have a mobile co-response team. I'm pleased to announce that Deputy Chief Dean recently was acknowledged by the CIT International Law Enforcement Group for an executive award for his efforts getting us to the over 400 CIT certified officers. And again, the 40-hour training block is a collaborative effort with Human Services, the professional clinicians, and subject matter experts on the PD that deliver the training. It's academic-based, it's role-player and scenario-based, so by the time they successfully complete that 40-hour training, they're pretty much able to handle most circumstances on the street. So what's the impact of CIT calls for service? Right now we're averaging about 3,300 CIT cases a year, and the average call time that the officer is with the individual averages about 2.5 hours. Mr. Wood mentioned the Oceanfront Camera Project. I agree, having the technology available in the cameras and other aerial resources is important. Originally, $7.3 million was allocated for 3 phases of oceanfront cameras for a total of 88 cameras. That was to cover the resort area and also to cover the sportsplex and the arena. Phase 1 included 25 new cameras were up and running, and they were completed in April of 2018. Phase 2 and 3 funding was diverted to the body-worn camera project because, as I said in the previous slide, that cost $5.5 million. So we're trying to be frugal with the money and getting the technology where we can. Right now we have access in the resort area alone to 50+ cameras. So those are the stationary cameras as well as the traffic management cameras that we can view. We have a view from an additional 40 cameras throughout the city with our abilities from the aerial surveillance of our drone team, which is beyond the police department, as well as our air unit. And the enterprise system of our Genetec system, those videos, the video cameras and traffic management system can be accessed by all public safety departments. We are in the process of compiling a CIP to expand the cameras broader, so we'll be talking about that in future meetings. We have what I would call, and many have called, the best training, not only in the state, but we're premier in the country. Success does not come by accident. Our Creeds facility is unique. It gives us an urban training environment where officers are able to engage in real-life scenario-based training. The training staff literally scrubs events in a nationwide perspective and incorporates that into our role-playing scenarios. We have the benefit of training at Academy just across the state line in Moyock, and that offers us a 4,000-acre facility with outdoor and ballistics capability firearms, and that's beyond just moving forward and back in a vertical line. That gives us tactical movement, moving left, right, forward, and back. It also gives us ability to move throughout structures and vehicles. So that's a really wonderful facility to have access to. Officers are provided in our training at Creed's high-speed and pursuit driving. We do our crowd management tactics and civil disturbance. We perform our critical incident response. We have worked with EMS to share their Stop the Bleed program and administer first aid activities to include the AEDs, the opiate antidote Narcan, and tourniquets. And this is where we use our de-escalation and use of force practical scenarios training. So it comes with a cost. It's a significant training. Other trainings that we do in the training academy include inclusion and diversity training and implicit bias, and we've been doing those trainings, bias trainings, for a number of years. But the training investment comes at a cost. These are a couple of structures at the urban village in Creeds. You can see there's water damage, they're leaking. So we're working with General Services right now to work through the repairs on the buildings. This is the cement, the grounds in the urban village. While it doesn't look that bad from afar in the picture, we've had officers literally trip, fall, and hurt themselves. We had a senior staff fall and trip and was out of work for a couple of weeks because he injured his back. So we're looking at repairing this. This is would be a significant capital investment. Our community outreach and trust building activities. So we do a lot of community outreach to our community. We're committed to our community engagement. Our officers reflect the virtues of policing. We have a guardian mindset, as Sir Robert Peel's ideal stated: the police are the public and the public are the police. We have a host of community initiatives, and I'd just like to highlight some quantifiable numbers from last year. So in last year, in all of 2019, the members of the Virginia Beach Police Department completed 2,015 community engagements. That included 559 community meetings, 456 community events, 381 school programs, and 619 other events. In that time frame, we had over 5,100 officers attend these events in total. A community event that was recently completed and spearheaded by Deputy Chief Gallagher was the Art Walk behind the 4th Precinct. There's actually a YouTube video of that, and I would encourage you to look at that. Here's a picture of our 2nd Police Precinct working close with the SeaTac community. Here's a picture of one of our mounted officers in Atlantis Apartments. This was taken on the night of one of our community surveys while we do the door-to-door in the different neighborhoods. Here's an officer doing a reading program at one of the elementary schools. And here's a Scouts tour of the 2nd Precinct. Mr. Morse, I don't know if this was your group or not. So community surveys, we have been doing them for quite a while, but really since 2010, we formalized our program to include an actual written survey with the purpose of the officers to go out and do door-to-door, gauge the citizens' feedback, assess their thoughts on the police department, and seek comment on how to improve our service. All members of the department, from the chief of police to the recruits, participate in this, and we initially developed the formal surveys as a response to support the mayor's action challenge a number of years ago. While the officers are doing the survey, we also provide them a packet of crime prevention information and topical information that can be shared with the community. So I mentioned community involvement. I wanted to talk about our long-standing relationships in the community. We have a citizen advisory committee, an advisory board. Officers are assigned to the civic leagues. We've been actively engaged with the Pastors Roundtable in Western Bayside for a number of years, the Resort Area Commission, the Human Rights Commission, and public schools. We also have 2 members that serve as liaisons to the Human Rights Commission for their LGBTQ liaison work. So some current topics of information or of interest. We've got a lot of inquiries through the manager's office on the use of force and the 8 can't wait policy. What we did is we took our policy and we inserted these specific points into our policy, highlighted the language in the policy, and posted that. This would be reflected in our use of force general order, and that's on the website. Another concern that's recently been voiced is a lack of citizen oversight. I believe the City of Virginia Beach is one of the only few in the region that has a citizen oversight. The Investigation Review Panel, commonly referred to as the IRP, was established in the early 90s, 1991. This is a group of citizens that are actually appointed by council. They review the cases at the conclusion of the administrative investigation. This panel receives the case in its entirety, and citizens that can participate in this have the opportunity to testify before the panel, and the police department reports on the details on the investigative panel, to the investigative panel. What this panel does not do, it does not have formal investigative process, it does not have subpoena process, and it does not have the ability to dole out punitive action against any department member. Other considerations currently in the national conversation and locally is mandatory reporting of use of force. We currently do that through the Virginia State Police Portal, and they report to the FBI. There's been conversation of defunding the police budget. Well, I think a lot of that conversation speaks to diverting funds to other departments, other efforts. I would suggest that your police department's already doing a lot of that by working with Human Services and the work we're doing with mental health. We publish our use of force reporting. I said we just lifted that document on the web page. We also release in aggregate form the Office of Internal Affairs statistics on a quarterly basis. We're actively recruiting a more diverse workforce, and we have a mandate to use the body-worn camera technology, and it's driven by our policy. So we continue to engage the community. We've been doing select community surveys in different neighborhoods. We work closely with those neighborhoods, and we encourage that dialogue, whether it's on a civic league level, person-to-person, virtual town meetings, as well as we're building our communication strategy. We're a leaning forward organization that holds ourselves accountable, and we seek comment for self-reflection and process improvement. So I attempted to hit the highlights of the department. I understand we're pressed for time, so I'm trying to be sensitive to your time. But Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions.
Okay, Mr. Wood?
Thanks. And Chief, that was a very good presentation, and I think it's important for the public to see it. You and I have had this discussion before. You know, unfortunately, people are rightfully outraged about some abuses that have occurred in Minneapolis and places like that, but it's patently unfair to paint all police departments with the same brush. As you point out, extremely low use of force, extremely open about policies, accreditation. I point out Minneapolis wasn't accredited, and only, I guess, 5% of departments nationally are accredited. Only 1% reach this gold standard, which the city has. You know, I was counting the other day how many opportunities we have for citizen boards involved in this. There's 3 CACs, I guess, 1 for each precinct.
4.
4, that's right. I keep thinking there are 4 precincts now. So 4 CACs, Animal Control Advisory Board, Senior Citizen Police Academy alumni, the Citizen Police Academy alumni. They got the Crime Solvers Group. So there's a lot of citizen interaction with that, which I think is really good. And I think, again, I think it's unfair to do that, especially when you talk about, you know, all the successes we've had. But I have a number of questions. Also, when you're looking at the low score on the citizen satisfaction for that 23459 zip code, that's Fort Story. I don't know how many people they polled up there. There's probably 1 guy they called. So, and you don't really go up there that often, so I think you're probably good there. Phase 2 and 3 of the not body-worn camera, of the oceanfront cameras, so it was diverted for the body-worn camera program?
The funding was, yes, sir.
Correct. So is that requested but not funded, or is that something you're rolling into next year's CIP, or
So it was originally requested and funded, but the funds were diverted. So what we've done is now putting a CIP specific to build on that.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, the 8 can't wait, you had mentioned, you said you added those to the policy, but in fact, those were already in the policy. You just added the graphics to
That
highlight.
is correct.
Okay.
I may have not been clear on that. Those 8 elements were already in the policy. What we wanted to do is pull those out for the reader that was navigating the website, looking at the policies, so they can literally go through the policy that's been updated with the highlights to bring the reader's attention to those
They can
points.
cross-reference it to that website.
Yes.
Okay, and finally, we talk a lot about use of force, and you touched on this briefly. Can you define specifically what use of force is? In the VBPD?
So in our model, which is probably one of the most rigid in the nation, a use of force would be any use of force that requires an officer to put an individual into custody. So if I may, I'll stand to the left of the podium. If I'm the arrested person and I simply have my arms at my side and the officer tells me I'm under arrest and he takes my arm and brings it behind him, that's not a use of force. However, if that same person locks his arms and the officer has to literally do a hand compliance and help bring his arm behind his back, that's a use of force in our department. We're also one of the few departments that requires a use of force report when the officer's service weapon is drawn on someone, as well as the taser when it's drawn on someone. We also require use of force when an officer engages in a pursuit activity. So what you'll find that's fairly unique across the board in the policing model. So initially, years ago, when we adopted this, I'll have to be candid, there was a lot of resistance to it because the officers thought we were going to use it as a gotcha moment, but as time has evolved, we can show with certainty by real numbers how many interactions and uses of force our officers had, and that brings us to those .00 type numbers.
So then based on that, so a use of force, especially when you say pointing a taser or a weapon at someone, that's not necessarily actually touching someone, and it still counts as use of force.
So those 3 examples, the taser, the service weapon, and the pursuit, those are 3 examples where the officers are required to report, but in actuality, the citizen is not physically encountered.
Okay, so all right, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tower.
Thank you, Chief, for that very complete report. I just had a couple of little things to
point out, one on slide number 3, you're using the figure 19 million visitors annually. I know where you got that figure, and I'm just advising you that the source of the figure is, which is the Convention and Visitors Bureau, has sort of withdrawn that number and is no longer using it because it had issues about the way it was computed. And I would just suggest you check back with CVB and get whatever, and I'd give you the number if I had it, but I don't.
I will check on that, but that's exactly where we got it, and that's why I mentioned it came from Visitor Convention Bureau.
I'll check with them. I think they've got an updated number. Could we look at slide 6 just for a moment? I'm not arguing with you about the way this is presented, but I do think it's important, perhaps in fairness to some of our other localities, you've computed the difference between the community demographic percentage for African Americans and the agency, i.e. the departments, and said we have the smallest gap, and that's true, but I would also point out that we have only roughly a third of the number. We've got 6.9% in our agency versus 20.3, which is, say, 35%, whereas take Hampton has almost half of their goal. If you look at them, they've got a 51% African-American population, and they've got 24%. They're really at 50% of their, if their goal is to have it equal, they're at 50% there, where we're only a third there. That's not an unfair point.
I think that's an accurate way to depict the numbers.
Okay.
What we're trying to detail here is that when you look at it in raw numbers and just look at the gap, we're at that point.
Right, and I'm just saying the third column gives one way to look at it, but another way to look at it is both, and I think it's true for Hampton and Norfolk as well, that they are closer to, if their goal was to reach the same percentage of the community, they're closer there on a percentage basis than we are. In other words, so we've got a ways to go to catch them in that, if you look at it in that way.
We have a ways to go to mirror our community, and that's our stated goal.
And I know, Chief, I've had a conversation with you about an additional point of comparison for how are we doing. There's a resolution that's been approved by the National Municipal League, and I've sent that to you, and I hope at some point you'll kind of do what you did with the 8 and kind of cross-reference it to where we are.
So that's done, Mr. Tower. As I said to you late last week, I have 3 documents. I'm in the final editing stages to share with you and the members of council. I want to cycle it through the manager's office, and I have to apologize publicly, but I want to get it right, and I want to make sure staff has had a chance to put their respective fingerprints on it before I kick it to this body.
Thank you. No need to apologize. I appreciate your working on it. A few other things have been going on at the same time.
Just a
I'm aware
couple.
of that. Just a couple.
Just a couple.
And then finally, the investigation review panel. Do you have any opinion as to how that's working and what it is contributing and whether it could be improved?
I think depends where you stand is where you're sitting. I think for many, I think it's been viewed as an opportunity to voice concerns. For some in the community, it's been an opportunity to not be able to tell their story. I think the challenge from a city's perspective is balancing the right size, the right structure of the process. This is just one of many different options. It's been deemed fairly successful, and we haven't had anyone that has voiced serious concerns. The biggest concern is some of the points that the cases that they wanted to dispute, the IRP did not want to visit, whether it was because part of the transaction, the officers were found out of policy, but the citizen wanted to pursue a different conversation. So I think it's mixed reviews. I think it's worthy of additional conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Bellucci, and then Ms. Abbott, and then Ms. Henley.
Thank you, Chief Zuccaro. I really appreciate your presentation and the information you shared with us. I'd like to just zero in a little bit on the mobile co-responder team, if we could, because mental health and law enforcement and public safety are related. And we all know, of course, that many, but not all, certainly, but many of the people who encounter law enforcement suffer from mental illness in one fashion or another. And that people with particularly serious mental illness who do encounter law enforcement are more likely to encounter law enforcement. They're more likely to have problems with housing, with employment, oftentimes with their families and in the community. And so breaking that cycle as early as possible, or preventing a serious encounter with the criminal justice system is paramount. And in fact, one of the improvements that's been suggested from members of the community in the national dialogue is about partnering with human services agencies, just as Virginia Beach is, with the mobile co-responder team, to break the cycle of the serious cycle that exists in the criminal justice system with regard to law enforcement and all the implications that occur. Incarceration becomes harder to get a job, people become housing insecure, and the list goes on and on. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that program specifically. For example, one thing that I think is worth noting is what I understand is that more than 90% of the mobile co-responder responses result in not having an arrest, which is critical.
So there's a high volume of cases that are diverted. I think it's closer to about 75 or 80%. So the mobile co-response concept is one that we initiated about 18 months ago or so, where we have our trained CIT officers that have gone through the 40-hour training, literally riding shoulder to shoulder with a clinician. This gives us a couple of advantages. One, it puts the clinician at the scene earlier. It enables the clinician to use their on-site observations. It enables the clinician to start that process of looking for resources and that diversion process. So that's one thing that we've done. Previously, we partnered with housing and development as well as human services to come up with a program we titled the Pinky Program. It was exclusively in the oceanfront, but it was a peer-to-peer kind of program where the citizens went out and addressed persons that were homeless. Our next evolution on our co-mobile response is going to be a social navigator, and what that'll be is we'll have officers assigned to do follow-up on some of these individuals so we can not only divert them at the initial point of contact, but then do some checks and balances and check in with them. So it's an evolving program, and I think it's proved very beneficial for our community at large.
I agree with you. I appreciate the continuity of care is so important. And the way that families and really our neighborhoods and community are impacted by the devastation that can occur with a person from mental illness entering a criminal justice system can be really devastating for individuals and for families and for our communities. So I really think your work there is to be applauded. Is it also true that the mobile co-responder team was meant to be expanded in this budget cycle, but due to some of the shortfalls that we were facing and some of the hard decisions that were made, that we weren't able to make to create that expansion this year?
So yes, we've put forward a proposal, and that impacts not only the PD's budget but also human services. So again, when I mentioned the defunding of the program concept, this is a great example where your city is ahead of the curve. We're using funds and we're partnering with those service providers to parallel the service delivery to get that accomplished.
It's one of the only programs of its kind in the Commonwealth. Is that true also?
I don't know for certainty, but I would speculate that we're very unique in that delivery system.
I think it's a great program, and I bring it up and to belabor the point because I'm hopeful that in the next budget cycle, or if the revenues are proved to be better than we anticipated in the projections, that we may be able to restore that as part of the ongoing conversations we're having about our police department and about our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Bellucci.
Ms. Abbott, and Ms. Henley, and then Mr. Wood, and then Ms. Wilson.
Chief, thank you. I'm sorry, I have to
You're fine.
talk behind you to some degree. Thank you for the presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Always very good. My question is kind of piggybacking on Councilman Towers' question. One of the things I'm hearing a lot in the community is that people want a citizen review committee, and I think our investigative review panel is very similar, and so my first question is, what, if any, difference between the two are there? And then you kind of alluded to potential improvements of that board. So I'm curious, and maybe we need to have, as a group, need to have a broader conversation about how we want that board to operate in terms of how participants are selected, terms, that sort of thing. So any additional insight you have on that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, so the members that sit on the IRP are appointed by council. They express an interest in written forms, and then are given a timeline that they sit as a commissioner. This is a review and recommendation process. The other side of the coin, and there's processes in between, but the other side of the coin would be establishing a body similar, in my mind's eye, similar to the Office of Internal Affairs, where you have a team of trained and competent persons doing investigations, presenting information to a body, and then that body makes decisions that could impact training, it could impact officer accountability. They would have the ability to subpoena persons, and would have the ultimate responsibility for delivering punitive discipline. I think some of the challenges that can be seen or talked about is in this far-right model, it literally takes the autonomy away from the department director and the chief, whether it's the PD chief, the fire chief, the Parks and Recs division chief, for conducting internal accountability, internal investigations. It removes any ability or stringently hampers the ability to do corrective processes in a timely fashion. That's not to say that there's advantages to each of those models, but I think there needs to be a healthy debate and conversation on what's best for this particular city and your police department. You know, for example, it's not the end-all. It's not the answer for everything. New York City PD has a citizen oversight. The officer that was involved in the Eric Gardner chokehold, it took the commissioner of New York City's police department about 5 years to separate him from the department because it went through the oversight board, it went through different reviews, and there was different layers of analysis. While I'm not pleased to say this, you know, we're able to separate our problematic employees in a much quicker fashion. And I would also remind the council that we do have external review on what the department does. Separation of our members comes not only at a cost for the investment that we've now lost, but it requires executive leadership approval in two key areas. One is the department director from Human Resources has to support that, and the other is the city attorney's office has to support that. So even as the chief of police, I have to get second and third support and review to separate an employee. Typically, when we do our due diligence, Human Resources and the city attorney is able to endorse it only because we put a case together that has a strong foundation. So I think it's worth additional conversation, but the investigation review panel that the city currently has been in place since 1991, and there's a list of cases that have been heard, and we literally share all those completed administrative investigations with Human Resources. The other part of this is a program and a process that's managed outside of the police department. This IRP is managed by the Department of Human Resources.
Okay, go ahead.
Question. So is there any difference between an investigative review panel and a citizens review committee?
I think it could be semantics, tomato, tomato.
Okay.
But I think the real difference, the core difference is the structure.
Okay.
So this does not have investigative power, it does not have subpoena power, and it does not have punitive action power.
Okay.
Where some models give investigative, subpoena, and punitive power. Right now, under this model, the PD, I have a team of supervisors that are assigned to the Office of Internal Affairs, and I'm happy to informally meet with council members and expose you to some of the internal files without breaching confidentiality to tell you what the scope, depth of the investigations are. For example, a officer-involved shooting case, the file could be that thick. These investigations are very thorough, they're very deliberate, and a bulk of these internal reviews are initiated at line level with the first line supervisors. So that's the real difference, is that would be the structure and the process.
Thank you. Well, I would just like to add, I would really enjoy further discussion on that specific topic.
I agree. We will have some further discussion on this, as it's a timely subject. Okay, Mrs. Henley.
Well, by now, the questions that I had, I think, have pretty well been answered. So I'll just make some comments. I noticed your highest satisfaction level is in the 5, 6, and 5, 7 zip codes. And when you can get 95% approval down county, you're doing good. So y'all do good. Only hear good things. And as far as the cameras, I'm sure you remember when we did the first one, it was very controversial. We were interfering with people's privacy. It was quite an ordeal to begin to have the cameras, but it's good to know that they are so widely accepted now, and I think people are grateful that they're there and that they are utilized to such an extent.
And the other collateral benefit that's been viewed as really an unintended positive consequence is now these transactions are taken out of the he said, she said, or he said. We now have a video recording, and the video speaks volumes.
Well, also a very good, and see, that's the thing I think that, you all are doing such a great job, because you have taken these ideas all along the way and have not resisted them, but have used them. And the same thing with the crisis intervention, that we are addressing the mental health issues, and we certainly do request more money from the higher levels of government every year for more mental health ability to do things from the state and federal. And I think the very fact that we are doing this has really been a great assist to our people, and I know the cooperation also with the sheriff as things go over to the jail, and so we're able to do these things, and I just think that we can say that our department is doing quite a lot. And as far as the citizen involvement, of course, you've got the citizen advisory committees, and they are so very active, and anyone can participate. And I think maybe that's the thing that we need to emphasize more, that people do have these opportunities, or these citizen senior academies and so forth. They're just all over the place, that people can become involved and become participants. And I think we just maybe need to make that more widely known. And as far as the investigative review panel, I know it's been around a long time, and I think it did kind of languish a little bit a few years ago, and we reactivated it. I believe there was someone who suggested that he was a good person to be on that board, and we, I think, have appointed him. I'm not sure. I guess he's still there, but I think we look to that board, that panel, to let us know. And so if they feel like they're not answering the need, we need to hear from them. I haven't heard otherwise, although I think there was a letter to the editor of somebody who had served about 20 years ago and thought they weren't very effective. But I hope now that the people who are on that board feel that they do have the ability to do what they need to do, and no one is keeping them from doing something if they feel it's necessary. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you so much for that cooperation with them. And, you know, when folks can tell us some specifics that we need to do, that's kind of what we need to hear. But I really appreciate all the willingness the department has been to incorporate all of these things as they've come along over the years.
Thank you, Ms. Henley. We consider the training and the partnerships with Human Services and our other partners as an investment in the community, and it helps resolve some of these difficult situations.
Thank you.
And Mr. Wood, then Ms. Wilson.
Thanks. And just coincidentally, talking about oversight, the city auditor has in his audit plan audits of the body-worn camera program, police property and evidence, and also the IRP, so the investigative review panel. So the city auditor is doing this as a matter of course, not, I don't believe it was requested by y'all, it was just.
So we've had some conversations with the city auditor. In fact, it was at our request that the auditor came in and did an independent audit of our Office of Internal Affairs. That report is also posted on the webpage. That's another initiative that we asked for, and Mr. Ramirez was able to deliver, and I think when you have a moment to view that, I think it would be very informative on what we do and how the auditor's office viewed that.
Ms. Wilson.
Again, thank you for you and your men and women for all they do to be our guardians, and I think that's a wonderful term. And I know this past year, I worked with y'all to help with the Hispanic community, because there was a lot of fear of the Hispanics with the police that, you know, they could be with the national news of being picked up and deported and all of that. And y'all immediately stepped up and did a national night out, and you did a Hispanic Police Academy that was incredibly successful, and I think you're going to do that again. And I love what you do with the resource officers in the schools and all the community policing. So please know how much I appreciate you. I have been really concerned about the shootings, and I've been told that a lot of it can be gang-related, and you know, that's probably part of the community policing, and wanted to know what can we be doing to get more involved, to get into the root cause of some of these gangs, and to maybe decrease some of this violence that's happening.
So during Thursday's special session, I alluded to our efforts in the community since March, where I mentioned, I think it was 30 search warrants, 23 weapons recovered. So that's one part. That would be the enforcement piece of the challenge. The other part of it is an educational piece. We need to inform and educate the community. That way, when they see something, they can say something. Part of the educational process is the family and the family's friends. You know, oftentimes the loved ones see their loved ones going down the road that's not the best place. So that impacts things. The amount of weapons we're seeing out in the community is troubling. And then finally, it's a system that we need to look at to address the enhanced penalties when we're in a position to place enhanced charges on those offenders. We're seeking those charges. We work very closely with the Commonwealth Attorney, and at the end of the day, or at the start of the day, it's the Commonwealth Attorney that often makes those decisions. So there's a couple of things that could be done, but if I can just stress the see something, say something. You know, we're in unique times. We're in very turbulent times. But the officers, while they're doing a marvelous job of being responsive, we have to balance the rights of everyone, including persons that came out July 4th and wanted to demonstrate. So we walked that line of supporting the First Amendment and all constitutional rights, but we just can't overstep that boundary. So it's a difficult challenge, but our officers are highly trained, they're poised, and they're ready to engage when and where possible.
And
Okay,
I'm sure there's some, you know, we're going to continue to look at the best practices and across the country of, you know, what the communities might be doing to.
Well, we're certainly scrubbing. I get several daily posts from national organizations, but quite frankly, a lot of those national organizations are calling us, asking for guidance on how to deal with the managed crowds, how to deal with implementing a new program, how to work through a use of force program and workforce accountability. So when I say your police department is a leader in the community and in the country, that's not an embellishment.
No, and I believe that, and I'm so proud that we have met the gold standard and we're in the top 1%, and it shows. And very, very grateful to all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Moss and then Ms. Henley.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good. How are you, sir?
My favorite topic is always about employee retention and fatigue of the force through the manpower shortfalls. And first, I applaud you. If attrition of 35% is what it takes to maintain your organizational culture, then that's a good number, because we don't want to be graduating people that aren't going to be able to participate and perform in the culture that you've built. And I think all these stats are a quality of speak to the people in the department. But you mentioned it was class 69, and obviously the big gap is between a time a police officer enters the force and making master police officer. That's a point of attrition. Generally speaking, the attrition after MPO is far less. That's my general understanding, less attrition. But if we're losing people between there and that spot, then at budget time, and they have a lot of data analytics people on your staff that look at statistics and stats, but I think the council as a whole would like to be educated, because if you look at every class, it was like they do in the military here, the year group, you have people that retire, you have loss, you have people for discipline left, but then you have people who leave at the 8-year point, why did they leave? You know, and sometimes they leave because it's just a better job opportunity. But when are we losing people for reasons that we have tools and techniques that we could apply that you don't yet have resources to implement? Because sometimes in trade space, we're focused on cameras, and I'm not saying that's not a good thing, or a training center, but in the end, it's the people, I'll call them the software part of the force, not the hardware part, that gets the job done. And when should we be making sure that we're maybe putting, in the short term, more resources into, whether it's incentive pays that don't count towards retirement or other types of compensation that goes to recognize the actual people, and because that's the thing that's the wolf closest to the door rather than the hardware part, which is always, a little sexier, always, and you show more results, but it doesn't really address some of the other issues of having 120 officers short and the fatigue that puts on the force. So I just hope we have this balanced look, so that when we go to this budget process, we don't forget that that's 1,000 people less 120 uniformed officers that are delivering these results. And, how long can we continue to ask people to make up that gap and still meet those results without having attrition factors? So I know we've had that discussion, but I hope you can bring that forward at budget time so we can look at the data and know what works and what doesn't work. Try some pilot programs, but I am concerned about what the shortfall of officers, which you said was about 15% the other day when you were here, that seems like a hard number to sustain over time and maintain these results.
So, Mr. Moss, I appreciate you for lifting that up for a broader conversation. But I would be remiss if I didn't show appreciation to the council for adopting the professional development program and lifting up the public safety pay plan. That pay plan was specifically designed with a lens on the members that we were losing in that time frame. I spoke about some other opportunities of funding for our senior staff, but we are looking at different remedies. The recruiting consortium is looking at almost all the items that you spoke of, and we're working as best we can with those elements, those external partners to help deliver our message, as well as bring the right qualified candidate to the table.
Thank you, Chief. Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Henley?
Ms. Wilson reminded me of something else, and that was when she said that word shooting. You know, we keep hearing about all these shootings, and this isn't police brutality, it's our citizens that are doing this, and it really concerns me. I know just last night and this morning, I hate to cut the television on because that's what you hear is who got shot wherever in Hampton Roads, and it's really disconcerting. But two in particular, it was either last night or this morning, there was a piece about a house on 16th Street, I think, that had bullets inside the house at children's beds. And then the article in the paper this morning, I think it was at one of the military housing, that there was a shot into the house. And this is so troubling. And then the shootings, I guess Saturday night, were both large parties. What's wrong with people? I mean, somehow or other, I don't know how we get to this kind of resolving the issue. And it's not your problem. Y'all are dealing with the aftermath, but somehow or other, we've got to deal with this mindset that people feel like they've got to go out and shoot. What can we do about it?
So, Ms. Henley, I don't have the answer to that. Well, I can talk about what we're doing, but let me just give you a little snippet of the challenge the officers are dealing with. The other morning at about 2 o'clock, we had a disturbance in the 1800 block of Atlantic Avenue. It happened outside one of the restaurants that serves adult beverages. Shots were fired between an older gentleman and some other folks. Officers were there and actually saw one of the individuals take out a long rifle from his vehicle and shoot it into the crowd indiscriminately. The officers were able to arrest and detain 2 adults. And here's the interesting part with the people we're dealing with right now. When they went to the detective bureau and they were placed in the interview rooms, one of the interview rooms has a restroom. One of the individuals chose to urinate on the floor in the interview room. The other individual stripped naked, climbed on the interview table, and attempted to void his bowels in the interview room. I share these notes with you to tell you what kind of persons we're dealing with on occasion. So I can't answer why they're going to go down the road and shoot into houses. I can tell you our officers are putting themselves in harm's way. They're dealing with these people as best they can, and both these persons were taken into custody without any use of force. So I think your women and men are serving remarkably under the worst of situations.
And we thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Wooten?
I just have a few questions, Chief Sikoro, about, again, going back to the investigative review panel. Now, can you refresh my memory? Is mediation a part of that process?
So the department has a mediation program that would be injected into the administrative investigation prior to it getting resolved and going to the IRP. So if the involved persons, to include the officers, agree, then they can come to the table. There's a city-facilitated mediator that works through the conversation. So we have a program. We've had limited use of the program. We've lifted that up in community conversations, made it a subject of internal conversation to remind the commanders that this is an option. Because oftentimes a lot of the citizen complaints are really about a misunderstanding, whether it's a communication breakdown or a misunderstanding on what the officer's lawful ability is. For example, the police cannot arrest for an offense that happened not in their presence if it's a misdemeanor. There's only very limited exceptions in the state code. So if somebody trespasses on your property and they leave before the police get there, the police can't take any arrest action. So that's a common misunderstanding.
Yeah, I remember being a part of a discussion, and it was a misunderstanding between a citizen and a couple of officers. And I remember during the process, the citizen wanted to sit down and talk with the officers through mediation, but it just wasn't agreeable. And so I was just wondering if the officers don't agree to it, it's just not going to happen.
Everybody has to agree to it.
Everybody has to agree.
Everybody has to agree to it. And we can certainly talk outside of council chambers, but I think the particular situation that you're speaking of prompted a couple of those officers to avoid wanting to engage in that mediation because of some of the conversations that were held elsewhere. So, but, you know, we have a mediation program. We modified the pamphlet detailing that, but everybody has to be part of the conversation. Otherwise, it's really not going to be beneficial to move forward.
And I guess the other part of the question or comment I guess I would have is probably for the body as well. In terms of the investigative review panel that we have, I am also getting feedback from citizens that say they want something with teeth because they feel like the panel we have now doesn't have teeth, and that relates to the fact that there's no subpoena power. Recommendations that are set forth are just that, they're not imposed, and so they don't feel that it's impactful. So those are some of the things that I'm hearing. And so I'm just wondering if there's a metric that we can use to see how I guess, successful the current panel we have, so that we can decide whether we need to fix what we have or improve what we have, or just revamp and do something different that pertains to the outcry of the community. I know that the IRP is only a subset of the Citizen Review Panel, so perhaps we can take it a bit further with a Citizens Review Panel and actually really get down to ensuring that the citizens see an effective process, because what they're saying to me is that it just doesn't have teeth, and they don't really feel that it's successful. And that's the feedback that I've been hearing. So in terms of the body, I would like to have, as Jessica Abbott mentioned, a more robust discussion on, you know, the two and how we move forward if what we have is not successful. Because sometimes we do have panels and programs in place that we've had in for years, but, you know, in terms of evaluating, is it working? If it is, fine, great. If it's not working, how can we improve it? And I think there should be more discussion on how we can evaluate if what we have is working properly.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? Chief Sakara, I just want to say that, you know, at this point in time in our nation, you know, never have police authorities been more challenged. But I can tell you that I personally feel, and I think a lot of people of this body and a lot of people in this city hold your department as a point of pride. And, you know, it's evident. I'm glad we had this discussion. I'm glad we had the discussion last Thursday. I'm glad of the response that we had over the weekend in managing a situation, and I think it would do well. I think it exhibited the professionalism of our public safety. We are the safest city. Our police, our fire, our EMS, our sheriff, our Commonwealth attorney, our 911 system help make Virginia Beach the great city that it is. And I'll tell you what, I always knew it, but hearing your presentation today, sometimes you got to blow your own horn sometimes. And I hope that, this presentation actually, goes up maybe as a separate video on our website and get out for people to see and appreciate, what the men and women do. But even, before COVID and everything, every weekend during the summer, whether it be the Shamrock Marathon, the Neptune Festival, or all the other things, you have become adept at, managing crowds and interactions. And a number of us have been out there and see the way that you interact with the crowd. And I hearken back to the weekend that we had something in the water where the planning and the logistics all came together and walking up and down Atlantic Avenue, people high-fiving, the fire, the police, and everybody. If we can catch that spirit of positivity again, of community and unity. And, once again, I'm going to say that Virginia Beach has the ability, to set the pace for the rest of the nation on how police and community can come together and, be effective and overcome the challenges we have. So thank you, God bless you, and God, just health and safety to all of the people under your command, and we are eternally grateful. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for your kind remarks and observations, and members of council. I will tell you the Virginia Beach Police Department is not a perfect organization, but we are a learning organization. We're willing to come to the table and be engaged in thought-provoking conversations. And as I hope my presentation illuminated, that we're ahead of the curve on many of these topical issues. So thank you for your time.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay, the next topic is that as we go forward, I think it's important, and was highlighted in this presentation tonight about the ability of council to engage in those type of conversations. And we have in front of you a list of topics for potential discussion items going forward. We're going to, number of council people, come to the vice mayor and myself and say, okay, how do we get things we want to talk about on the item. So if you can kind of rank order, but additional topics, things like talking about, the process of, IRBs and, what we can do to go forward. I think it's important that, council has the ability to get some direction going forward. So if you can rank order it and hand it to me, we'll compile it and we'll start, getting some of the discussion items on the agenda, so we're going to be able to talk about things as a body. And I think it just, it just helps us as a body to, to have those meaningful discussions, going forward, so we can do that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
While we're on the subject of discussions, it's been brought to my attention that we need to make a decision as to what we're going to do about these two very, very large and important zoning or planning items that are coming before us, and that is the meeting on August the 4th for Westminster, Canterbury, and the second one is the proposed meeting in August the 18th for the Thalia rezoning and development application.
We're talking about going off-site for that?
And my suggestion to you is that we probably should go to the convention center.
Yes.
Because there's going to be an enormous number of people who want to participate in the discussion on those two items. And I don't want to disappoint anybody in having their opportunity to express themselves and have their input. So I would suggest, and I hope the council will support, that we go to the convention center for that and give the clerk plenty of notice that, so she can plan.
Yep, I think that's a good idea. Ms. Abbott?
Can we also find a way to be able to stream that for everyone, both at home and maybe, I'm assuming we'll probably have to have some kind of overflow seating as well? I know that we're always told that you can't live stream at the convention center.
Yeah, yeah. Clerk?
My understanding from communication staff is that we cannot live stream to cable channels from the convention center, but it can be streamed on bbgov.com as well as Facebook Live.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Okay.
Well, if we could make that accommodation.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think that's a combination worth taking, and I think when we do have these type of controversial things that will bring out people, you know, whether it be the monument or, you know, thing that the convention center, you know, would accommodate everybody, and I think it, you know, it's worth, you know, us traveling to make sure everybody's heard. So I thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Jones. Okay, anybody else have any, you know, okay, Mrs. Henley and then John.
Thank you.
Okay?
Well, you know, today we have on the agenda the salaries of our appointed people, and last year at this time, we were going through quite an ordeal with the issue of the city manager's salary. I don't think we'll have that issue this time, but it kind of made me think of the new city manager's contract and some things that I don't understand about it, and since we didn't get a chance to talk about it, I'd just like to let you know some of my thoughts and concerns, and whether you want to explain it to me today or another time, you may. You know, I understand, of course, that the new city manager's salary is $270,000 versus $250,000 of what we had prior. But the prior city managers had a flat deferred comp payment of $10,000 a year. Now it's going to be 6% of gross salary. So I'm assuming that that will increase each year if salary increases and would be a part of it. And 6% of $270,000 is a little over $16,000. So that was a substantial increase, I think. In looking also at another thing that seemed to be different is some look at the leave policy. A lot of talk about paid time off. The new city manager will have 15 days when he starts of paid time off, and then will accrue according to other employees. But then there's a 40 hours of executive leave annually, and I don't know what executive leave is. If someone wants to explain that to me at some point, but I think it's important that we know, you know, what the time off is so that we will be expecting it, because I think these things are a little different. And the severance pay policy is quite different. Instead of a 6-month severance pay, it's now equal to 12 months of the annual gross salary. And in addition, 9 months of the COBRA continuation, and also payment of all accrued leave at the time of termination. So it's quite a broadened severance pay package, and I was a little surprised at that. Since we didn't talk about it, I just thought I would tell you what I think. Since I didn't vote for it, I guess I don't have a right to complain, but I'm glad I didn't vote for it.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Moss.
Well, ditto your remark, Mrs. Henley, but I'm on a different topic. I'm not going to, but this is a topic on today's agenda, the CARE Act funding, which I will be pulling. I have an alternative, which I sent you all an email. You probably, if you read your email, you probably saw it last night, but this is the actual resolution. I'll save the time to discuss it when the matter comes up for a vote, because I know we have other things, business to conduct today. But I do have two other items which I think we probably won't resolve today, but I hope when you're doing your priority that we need to address. One, since they want to be doing this comp plan survey, I raised the issue about the questions and whether or not those are the questions we want to ask. So I just want to make sure the staff knows that until we've had that discussion, that we kind of agree that that survey isn't going out, because we suggested that we did want to talk about that survey and those questions. And since we have approved the stormwater management and all those new ordinances, we didn't get at the time a quality assurance plan as to how we're going to make sure that those actually are implemented, and there would be something that the auditor lady could audit, because we've had experiences when we're not enforcing the policies we already have. So I would hope that we, at some point in the future, and if we don't, I'll bring forth a resolution to do so, that there be a time certain when that product would have to be delivered to this council for review. Because I think absent a quality assurance plan, what we have is an unprovable policy. And I don't think that's what any of us want. I think all of us want a policy that we know is being enforced and can be audited. So those are my two top topics. I have others, but they're on that list, and I'll work with the body as to their priority, Mr. Mayor.
That'd be great.
So John, what are the differences in here? So I don't have to.
You may recall when, I can do it now, when we had a discussion, one of them was, what was the purpose of the CARE Act funding? Not the payroll protection, not the small business loans, but the CARE Act funding, when you go through it, was really designed to focus on delivering benefits to individuals and families. That was the real focus of CARE Act, and then the immediate expenses that we are incurring. My view is, just one, we talked about, I think more of the money should have been going into residents for rent relief and all those types of things, and that's the difference. On the initial thing, it just says $14 million economic support. It doesn't delineate what that economic support is. You may recall in the briefing, there was $9 million, I think it was, hold me correct, acting manager, that was going to go to business, and another part was going for support to individuals. I think 2/3 of the money should be going to individuals, and 1/3 of the money should be going out to businesses, since there's other sources for businesses to secure funding that aren't available to individuals and families. And we have a great need in the community, especially in terms of rent. As the money starts to run out for 31 July, we're going to see a lot more demand for economic assistance. And additionally, there was some discussion, you may recall, about what a small business was. And remember, Mr. Taylor talked about whether there was a state definition that they could use for 50 or less people. And they wouldn't have to be inventing that, and we could focus our energy on the smallest of businesses have the greatest of need. So clearly, and there was also a discussion that we had at that time, is there's also, if we're talking about minority goals for set-aside procurement, we ought to be thinking about, are we making sure that a percentage of that funding, the like goal, would be set aside for struggling minority businesses, because they're among the hardest hit of the small businesses. But when we got the resolution, it didn't read any differently than when it was briefed to us, and it was rolled up into higher aggregates. And I just thought that no one was listening to what we had to say. And we just got the same old thing. This is an attempt, I think, to reflect at least what I thought I heard. I might have been wrong. If it is, it won't pass. But to show a preference for residents over business in this amount of money, and of the money for business to set aside, consistent with our SWAM goals, a portion of that money, I think it's 16%, and for small businesses that are SWAM qualified. That is the fundamental difference between the one thing from staff and this version.
So are you saying that no businesses with more than 50 employees are qualified?
Correct.
All right, so if I can, the issue I have with that is, and I think I used this example last time, where you've got franchisees and you've got, and whether it's a restaurant or a haircut in place or something like that, that because of their nature, there may be like 10 employees in one location, but overall they have 70 or 80 employees, but it's their individual businesses, but because of the way they do it. And the classic example, and I was talking to a staff member today about, is the dentist thing, and you know that his dentist is the same in the same practice as mine, and they both were hurt in some of these places. And I talked to one restaurant, and they're spending close to $1,000 a week in PPE and things like that they can't, they don't get reimbursement for, and certainly medical practices that are franchised, if you will, for this purpose, if they're spending all this money for PPE that they cannot bill through insurance for, because there's not a code for additional PPE, but they're having to absorb that cost. So I think that's an issue I would have with that. And you know, I mean, I think there's ways to get to it if we do some sort of cap or something. But I think we have to make sure that we don't hurt small businesses that, because of the way they're structured, they end up.
Mr. Mayor.
If I could respond.
Yeah, sure.
I couldn't do it as eloquently as Mr. Tower did a couple of weeks ago when he talked about this. I don't doubt that it's true what dentists and doctors' office do, and they structure it for tax purposes. for economy of scale of legal services, HR, and all other things to reduce their per capita cost of business. So those are favorable things which they in fact are achieving a major economic benefit, which to a small business who's not in a professional cadre cannot use and do not have the advantage. I mean, but I think.
Well, but the example is with haircutting places and
haircutting,
restaurants and things like that.
True, but in the end, you got to ask yourself is, if you're looking about who is that small business, and 47% of all the small businesses are fewer than 10 employees nationwide. Fewer than 10. 75% of the money that came out of the latest federal thing went to a very small group of businesses. You could watch it on CNBC this morning. Because what's happening is, who's better able and sophisticated with the staff and the time to take advantage of these programs? Now, if we want to make it all lottery, which I would love, I'd never saw anybody buying into that. Otherwise, the people that are the best positioned from knowledge and professional staff and resources, and this little guy who you really doesn't have any of those and will never recover. I think my dentist has recovered. I was just at the dentist. I don't think he's, dying over the fact that he's got those expenses. Personally, I didn't hear him complaining, and I've chatted with him. But my point being is, but who is the most vulnerable? Who is the most vulnerable in our business community? And I think it's these smaller businesses. I wish we could say 10. I was willing to accept Mr. Taylor saying he didn't have a workable definition for 10, but he had a workable definition for 50. But if people believe, and you could see, and he even acknowledged that where that other money, when they looked at the data, they said, your point was right, Mr. Moss. Really, we didn't like how the results turned out. And the people and if you go look at those results, they'll reflect some of those things. But I just think we should be here using this money to get to the people who are truly the most vulnerable businesses. And I don't think it applies to lawyers and doctors who form associations to take advantage of other tax laws and other spreading their costs are not as vulnerable as a guy who's a 2 or 3 person shop.
Okay, Mr. Bellucci.
Well, I guess we'll have a chance to talk about this later on in the evening, but I'll just say that I received I've received several inquiries and from people in the community who are in particular interested in how the CARES Act funding would support relief for nonprofits and arts organizations and just nonprofits in general. And to Councilmember Moss's point, if the focus is on individuals and families, I just want to advance the fact that supporting nonprofits, supporting those organizations that serve our community does support residents in the form of jobs, critical services, and other things like that. So I can't see here where nonprofits and organizations such as I just described would be included in the direction that came from this alternative version, but I'd be interested in hearing a response.
It's not in the main motion either.
Well,
I only added 2 categories. I didn't change anything else.
I think economic support in line E, $14.5 million would be inclusive of those.
Well, you would think, but that doesn't specify that purpose in that resolution. That's another point. This thing doesn't really provide any specificity. Now, we have this briefings, but this ordinance doesn't make reference to any other subcategories.
Well, that's just a concern I wanted to raise, and I guess we'll flush it out a little more later. And perhaps Councilmember Ross would be agreeable to be more precise in his recommendations. But for the purposes of this discussion, I just want to say 2 things. One is an update from the Human Rights Commission. They created 2 new task forces, one on COVID-19 and the other on racial tension. Of course, these are 2 major issues that we're all contending with. And I just want to point out and thank the members of the Human Rights Commission who are volunteers for continuing to deliver on their promise and their volunteer leadership to advocate for human rights of everyone in Virginia Beach. So I think it's, even in spite of the fact that many of them face their own health concerns, and they continue to work together electronically and in small groups to deliver on what we've asked them to do, and I'm very grateful for that. The other is that I'm just going to pass a revised version of resolution number 2 on our agenda tonight, which includes a technical correction. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson.
I just wanted to speak on this number of employees that one sector, COVID has affected every sector across the board. I don't know any group that hasn't been, group or business or almost any person that hasn't been affected by it. But I know one particular has been the restaurants, and a lot of the restaurant people have way more than 50 employees. You know, they may have 125, or, I mean, even I think talking to Mr. Gambrell, and he has 150 employees for his little restaurants. And so I'm worried about if you limit it to 50, you're going to wipe out a whole sector of people who are adversely affected by this. So that 50 number does bother me. And it's not like you're talking about the lawyers and the dentists. And I mean, the restaurants really did suffer greatly because they were shut down. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that I really am concerned about the number 50 and limited, because
I'm concerned about everyone. It's only $14 million. It's supposed to cover individuals and businesses. I know the demand is greater than 14 million. So if we are not going to say we're going to protect the most vulnerable by some criteria, then we ought to say, throw your hat in the ring, we draw a lottery number, and you independent, because there's no other way you're going to be able to make a judgment, because there isn't enough money to meet all the demand. So now we're not the ones doing this allocation, as you know. This money is going to be given to another group to decide how it's allocated. We saw their first allocation, and that's not something to be overly proud about. But nonetheless, how then do we have an objective criteria by which you ration a scarce resource against an infinite demand and say it's fair, other than just you throw your hat in the ring and if your number comes up and when the money runs out? I didn't think we had a big appetite for that. So at some way, you have to have some basis by which you say, you know, if you were a really small business, you couldn't get one of those loans from a bank because you were too small. And the banks, so there are people who weren't even eligible for those loans at all. And so I'm just trying to figure out, how do you capture, this is discretionary money that we're not bound by all those other rules. It's a bank, it's a grant. So how do we best use a grant to help those who have no other source to go to get relief? And we did not get a methodology, did not come out the other evening. They recognized the shortfalls of the system that they had, but we didn't get any method by which our money that we get, that we would be giving to them, would in fact be allocated. We're just giving a grant and telling the Development Authority, come up with a way. And I'm just saying, I'm not happy with that. But if the majority is, then obviously the will of the majority speaks, but I don't think it will be doing the intent of the legislation itself.
The staff, if the nonprofits, like Michael asked, if that's included in this, or
And Mr. Mayor, I was going to
mention the version.
I was going to mention, we didn't want to impede on quality discussion of the council, but when you do get to the item, we are prepared to just take a quick minute and just go over what we had done on the allocation. Remember, of the 39 million, you still had 10 million that was being proposed to be in a reserve, so you could monitor and make some other decisions later as well.
Okay,
so
why don't we hold the discussion on it? I'm sorry, go ahead, yeah. Jess?
Sorry, this mask keeps getting stuck on my glasses. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I have been meeting over the last couple months with all kinds of small business associations, and the number one thing I hear is that I didn't have the education, the ability, the financial means to apply for these federal grants and programs, the state programs, all of them. And then when they heard about what we did early on to try to give grants to those that were the most at risk, they were still in the same position to apply for them. So I see the criticisms of what Councilman Moss has brought forward, and I'm empathetic. I think there is a real reason to include nonprofits specifically, because they provide a valuable amenity to our citizens, and without those nonprofits, we lose out on a lot of the things that makes us a community. So I think there's room for that. I can appreciate the concern with some of the businesses that have different formats and generally carry a higher payroll because Councilman Moss is correct in that the people that are suffering the most right now are the people that don't have the means to apply for these programs. And I think part of the reason the CARES Act was structured the way it was to give to localities was because localities know where their community is most in need. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to say, I see these vulnerable parts of our city, and I possess that ability to make sure that money goes to those groups of people. So, you know, if we are unable to make that decision, or if we have a disagreement in who is worthy of that money, then perhaps we should really seriously consider a lottery, because then that takes the onus off of us, and we say, you know what, we'll do what we can to make sure the resources are provided to you to be able to submit a timely application, but it's just going to be how it is.
Okay. Yep, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chandler, do you know, do we have a list of businesses who have actually requested help from this funding?
I'm thinking that'd be EDIP. Deputy City Manager Ron Williams Jr. come up.
So Taylor Adams will be here at 6 for the discussion. We thought you'd have the discussion during that time on the agenda, so apologize. And he's been much more closer to the applications that have come in. We haven't had requests specifically for this money, but this has been the feedback. The recommendation came based on the feedback of what we were seeing, the most impacted business sectors, which had been the hotel, restaurant and retail sectors predominantly, and then professional services following that. Of when you see unemployment, and then you see what we saw also in their applications. That first round, and Taylor can walk through again, of the $10,000 cap limit grant opportunity was very diverse in size, very diverse in business sector, and very diverse in geography across the city as far as who actually got awards. And there was a criteria ranking that was done on them as well, based on their need and vulnerability. So because this hasn't been promulgated to a full program for the allocation, we haven't had anybody say, I want that yet, but we know that there is a demand out there. Specifically, that's where the PPE and the adaptation of the workplace came into place.
And what was it, $8 million that we
I think, Alice, we had
before?
$9 million for the economic assistance, 9.2, and then in the individual.
Has that $9 million been used?
No, sir, because you haven't appropriated, authorized that yet. That's what the ordinance is for this evening.
Okay.
The other bucket in the individual assistance, which I believe Alice did include the nonprofits in that.
Right. 1.8 for nonprofits, 6.3 for the total.
So
and that question, you know, that could be in business also. I mean, it's really, there was cultural affairs and then charitable nonprofits that through our cultural affairs office, we had a high touch with them all through the pandemic, and understanding where they were on their operations, where they were on the business model, where they're going to close permanently, and what their real need was. And so there was some estimates that were done through that staff to understand what's really going on in the nonprofits. I'm not sure why we ended up including in the individual bucket, but it's really intended as the business of the organization that provides those services, whether it be charitable or cultural. I'll also add that part of the consideration for the individual assistance is that this, other than the PPP program, which was very challenging for businesses, and the aftermath of that is going to continue as Congress, I think, continues to make amendments in what that was and the repayback or the forgiveness of those loans, but it was very challenging for businesses. This is one of the main sources for businesses, whereas for individuals, for rent assistance, and for eviction abatement, we have the HUD money, the state money, and the FEMA money that's also come parallel, that was in the briefing that Alice provided to you, that augments this, and there's likely more to come as well, because the state has let us know that there could be more allocations.
Okay. The program that we have here, the $8 million, that's grants though, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, direct assistance.
Now, this $39 million would be, is it loans or is it grants?
Grants.
It's grants.
All
also.
grants.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you already have a list of applicants that I'm assuming that you probably have a list of applicants of small businesses in the city who have applied, who you did not have funds to provide to. Is that correct?
We would recommend that there be a new application process so that everyone has an opportunity to apply. The previous applications have been vetted, their awards have been earmarked, whether they're in the housing assistance or in the utility assistance or in the business assistance, we would start fresh, a new applicant opportunity. With an understanding also that there is a timeline that these monies need to be spent otherwise returned back to the federal government.
That the monies need to be what now?
Returned back to the Fed.
Not so used.
If not so used. In other
Yes, sir.
Is there some way you're going to be able to judge that?
The funds expire 31 December of this year.
In other words, is there some way you're going to be able to confirm that the money has been used for the purpose that you gave it to them for?
Oh, yes, sir. That's part of the application process. And that's in part what we've done with the first business assistance, where we had the auditor that assisted us in that review and an audit of the program as well.
Okay, I guess, Mr. Moss, does that meet your goal as to what you were talking about?
Well, when you look, and I did study all the people that got the grants and got the $10,000 grants, and that was a conversation. And you go look at our top employers and our top property holders in our bond prospectus, you're going to see those people well represented in those grants. And there's no way you can say those are among the most needy people in our community when we advertise them in our bond prospectus. So I have some question, which I think Mr. Taylor, if you go back and watch the videotape, acknowledged that it wasn't the result. If they had to think it over, it would be a different result. So what I don't know, Mr. Jones, is I don't have any idea as to what's going to be different, and we're not the people making those decisions unless we provide some kind of prescriptive language in the ordinance that we adopt, that we're not going to get the very same kind of result. And the only way I know, because I really don't like the judgment part, I would prefer the lottery. At least that's randomness at its play versus who's really good at writing grant proposals and who's best at, what their education level is to fill out all the material and all the stuff that you look at. There's just an inherent bias against people who are out there trying to be busy, trying to keep their business afloat when they're trying to fill out all this paperwork. So there is some kind of structural bias to who the people we're trying to help. And so I am not convinced, because we haven't seen what the new and improved process is. I'm no more convinced that we'll get a better, a more random result going forward with this $14 million than we did with the other money that we had. And I just think that we inherently want to do good, but we're not going to get a good result if we just write someone a check and say, take your process, because we didn't get that kind of result last time, and people were left out. So this was an attempt to try to target it. And will there be people disadvantaged by it? Absolutely. I would not take any exception to what Mrs. Wilson said. But I don't know how you can make any process that isn't going to leave someone on the other side of the line when the wants exceed $39 million if you put all the money into business relief. But I do know that there's people out there, very small businesses, as Councilman Abbott talked about, who are just out there in the, I'll call it the riptide of the financial disaster of COVID, and they're struggling just to stay in business. I'll alone go and fill out one of these applications and do all that stuff and in a timely fashion. And the only way they're going to get that is if we triage how we're going to get the money out. But I will acknowledge there's not going to be any way that someone's going to say that's objective or fair. So I just tried to look at other ways that we in the state has looked at and said, we want to help small businesses. They had that definition of 50. That was something we didn't have to make up because there's already something we can apply. And if we could do 10 or less, that might even be better. But no, the explanation so far does not get us to, I think, the result that we want to get the money to the people who are the neediest. I do agree with Mr. Belushi that probably the nonprofit wasn't something that was on my mind, and that's probably something we need to take a better look at. But I did know the ordinance did not mimic the breakdown that was in the presentation. A lot of stuff was rolled up, and in fact, the ordinance doesn't even specify the line item adjustments in the budget that would be made based on this. It just talks about purpose and an amount, and I guess the budget director would make that based upon the slides, I assume. But I just think we need more prescriptive understanding of what is actually going to be the process by which these funds will be applied. And as it is now, we're giving a grant, and what the intention is, we hope they do good, and we hope the results are better. I just don't think that's how we can conduct business.
Okay, Ms. Wilson.
Guess
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones.
I'm trying to get to the bottom line here as to what it is we want to tell the staff we want done.
Well, I guess that will be at the vote.
Where, you know, Mr. Belushi wants nonprofits included in it. That's the crux of what your resolution is. Is that right, Mr. Belushi?
Well, Mr. Jones, I think I just want to make sure that nonprofits continue to be included. What I heard from the report is that they are currently in the ordinance that is in our package. I don't know that they are in Mr. Moss's alternative.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Wilson.
I think John makes a really good point of how do you decide if you have 1,000 apply and you only have enough for 500, how do you decide?
Right.
And no matter if you have a problem filling out the forms, a month ago, you may still have a problem filling out the forms. I mean, people are going to have assistance. I do think part of the problem that we had last time was not enough people knew to apply. I mean, I talked to a lot of people, and I said, did you apply? Well, no, we didn't know. So I think there's multiple issues. One is getting the information out to apply and how to apply. I think the lottery is probably a really good idea. And that way we're not picking the winners and losers. You know, figure out how many people qualify, and then that way it's not decided by someone picking the winners and losers. It's all by the lottery. I like the idea, actually. But I would rather not cap it at 50.
Oh.
Because especially, I think, and it's not just the restaurants, but I know the restaurants have really suffered.
If we had a lottery and
lot
capped the amount of money that each person gets, I find that workable. I find that workable.
A lot of them don't have more than 50 employees because they have part-time employees and dishwashers and all that kind of stuff.
Understand.
The participants in the lottery, though, we have to make sure that they qualify under any guidelines that we have from the people who are giving us the money. I mean, we can't just have a lottery and dole out this money.
Well, I think she said for
Anybody who's
qualified
in the
applicants.
lottery.
I think that's what
I said qualified.
Councilwoman said, qualified, and put a cap on it, 25,000, whatever it is, and when it's all gone, it's all gone.
Any comment, Ms.
And I
Keller?
think the point that Mr. Jones, Councilman Jones made is that it is a grant, and then you do have to provide receipts, and you have to provide proof that you were impacted because of the pandemic, which I think that'll be very easy to do for most businesses. It's the receipts that you're going to need to have. And I don't think anybody that's in a business would have a problem coming up with receipts. I mean, that's just the nature of doing business. I think we tried to make this very categorical, like most cities have been doing, because there's changes. We just got another ruling or guidance from the Treasury June 30th of how you can use this money. So we wanted to not say to the penny where everything was going, but give broad categories in case there's more need for nonprofits or more need for businesses, that we had some flexibility in that. And so what we also decided to recommend to council is Don't allocate all 39 million at once. Save some because things might change. We might have to reappropriate. We might need more money for individuals. We might need more money for business. We might need more money for city expenses. And as we're finding when we did the presentation 2 weeks ago, guidance came, we have more city expenses that qualify than we previously thought. So it's a little bit more flexible than a very specific grant. And so we really want to, and your points are very well taken, we really want to get to the individuals and the businesses that need it the most.
Okay. Mr. Bellucci, then Ms. Wooten.
Well, I just want to
And Mr. Tower.
reemphasize the point that it's businesses, individuals, and organizations. Because the organizations that we value and that we rely upon and that we enjoy as a community, as a city, are at the risk of failing to exist. And if we don't take a proactive step to ensure that we support them through this difficult time, which I know we're all committed to, I just want to make sure that it's clearly reflected, then when we reemerge from this crisis, the most important, among the most important valued, treasured aspects of our community, the programs we enjoy, the associations we're members of, are at risk of failing to continue to serve our community. So that component is critically important, as well as the residents' relief and businesses as well.
Thank you, Ms. Wooten, and Mr. Tower, and then Ms. Abbott.
I'm sorry. I just want to go back to outreach again. Had the same conversation when this was brought up before. Is our outreach strategy still the same? Have we made adjustments based on the comments that we had last time? Are we going to just keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? How are we going to change that strategy to reach out to the most vulnerable? Because as Councilmember Wilson mentioned, most of the businesses had no idea the funding was available, and then when they find out, it's too late. So we have to do something different to address that issue in terms of changing our outreach strategy. I just want to know, are we doing that? And this is not my first time saying that.
I appreciate it.
Said it over and over again.
I think Taylor Adams probably better to talk about the outreach for the economic. I think with the non-for-profits, we also have a process in place in our community organization grants, and I think we're going to try to use that same type of process for outreach. I think one of the strategies that we're trying to do is hold back that $10 million. So when we have businesses that I didn't know, we have some extra funding later on. So it's not a one shot and that's it. So we have a two-shot thing. But I do agree that outreach needs to be a lot more wider and broader. And I think in the first EDIP grant that was done very quickly, we do have a deadline with this. We do have to have this money all spent by December 30th. Otherwise, we need to return it to the state. So there is the need to do it quickly, but also reach as many people as possible. Okay. And so that is something that needs to be taken into account.
Good. Mr. Tower, and then Ms. Abbott.
My question was really to Mr. Moss, and his resolution was just an explanation of your changing the amount as between businesses and individuals. Just be interested to know what your thinking was.
My thinking is that there's been lots of large federal and still existing money done by the feds and also putting out grants to businesses in the first $3 trillion that went out the front door, and $570 billion of that is still available as of CNBC this morning, and the Treasury Mnuchin speaking on an interview. So there's plenty of dollars out there for the larger businesses and for businesses that aren't really small because they can't qualify. And then I said, well, then there's the individuals who are still for unemployment and still that's not supposed to pick up until January of next year, and those other relief programs are running out, and people have talked about that people who now are using that to pay their rent and pay their bills and do all their other things are now on the economic fringe. We just don't see it yet. We don't see that the airline money runs out on 30 September, and you're going to see significant layoffs in the airline industry. So therefore, latent demand that we don't currently see because of all this extra $600 a month, $600 a week of federal unemployment, that's going to start to show up, and right as in this August, September, October period, there's going to be a bigger demand than what we think we see, and therefore I just made and it's arbitrary, I'll admit it.
Yeah.
2/3 going to residents, 1/3 going to business. I probably, in light of the nonprofit piece, would look at that differently in terms of split, but I do think it's really individuals who struggle the most with government programs, to say the least, that are going to be the people left at the end of 31 July if Congress, before they go on their election run, don't do something, which is uncertain they're going to, then that's going to be a big step up in individual people and economic need. And so that was my rationale, just based upon macro level information that's out there.
Of what's out there now, what's the phase, are we up to phase 4? Is there, when Congress reconvenes, is it not likely that they're going to
Well, as you know,
more money, and is it for
if you
individuals?
follow this, if you listen to, and if you believe Senator McConnell on the Senate side, additional money to the states aren't happening because he thinks they're asking for that money to bail out their pension plans, and I think there's a stall. So I don't know if they can find a legislative compromise between now and the end of September. They're on 2 weeks of recess, as you know, the July 4th recess. They come back, they got a lot of things to do. If you can guess that, you should go invest in Wall Street, Mr. Tower, because I don't know, but you're betting that they will do something, and if they do something, it won't be probably in August. It'll probably be just before the clock strikes midnight on September 30th, but the money runs out on 31 July.
Okay. Well, I would just be more inclined, personally, I think, to dilute the business side. First of all, I agree with your small business definition. I think it is as good as any other way to put a qualification on the neediest of folks. On the split, though, I would tend to include the nonprofits on the business side. In other words, dilute that side with the nonprofits, but make it a split between individuals.
Yep.
And business.
There's all trade space there. I think we're after is the best result.
Right. Okay, Ms. Abbott, and then Mr. Wood, and then Mr. Rouse.
Well, I wanted to talk a little more about the outreach strategy as well. One of the things that I ran into a lot was the educational piece and people understanding how to apply for these grants. It just so happened that I met with a small business organization just before we opened up the application process for the first round of the EDIP, and I got questions immediately that week saying, I don't know how to fill this application out. So my question for staff is, how do we make that a little more robust of a resource so that when we're engaging these small businesses that would have never pre-COVID considered applying for any kind of government support, how do we make sure that they really do have a great understanding of maximizing their chances of receiving their dollars?
We have a partnership with a women's business center from ODU that we started during the pandemic. That first they started with assistance for the Small Business Association loans, and then that evolved into assistance with the EDIP. If anyone called and asked, they could get assistance with the application. We are actually have another space that we are getting ready to occupy in Town Center that will be purposefully for that. Small Business Assistance Center, and in particular for the recovery assistance out of the gates. So it should be that if anyone needs assistance, all they need to do is call, walk them through on the telephone, and/or by appointment, that we can do that.
Okay, we're going to do Mr. Wood, then Mr. Rouse, and then if it's okay, we're going to move on and we can finish the discussion, on the vote when Taylor Adams is here. Okay.
Actually, my comments on a different topic, so
Okay.
I'll wait. Mr. Rouse.
Mr. Rouse?
My comments on a different topic as well. It won't take long.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so, and this is just procedural thing, and the city clerk has asked me about this, and do we intend to continue to have meetings half virtually, half in person? And I think it's been an issue for the clerk. And I don't know if, Amanda, if you want to address what the deadlines are and things like that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So we have the planning ad all the way through July 21st has already been submitted to the Virginian Pilot. Tomorrow is the deadline for the planning advertisement for July 28th meeting. And the question is, do we want does council want to continue to provide a WebEx link for citizen input? Or is it now going to go back to in-person meetings all the way? I just need some input and some guidance.
Okay, the question is input, we're, was it 21st is the last schedule, advertised one for the WebEx?
Yes, sir, and the ad needs to be submitted to the pilot tomorrow for July 28th meeting.
Okay, have we reached a point where, we're comfortable with people coming in and not doing it virtually? Virtual has been a challenge for us, especially when we weren't convening as a group, but even now, I think we've ran into some glitches along the way, but, I'm open to suggestion, but, I think the quicker we get back to normalcy as best we can, but certainly open for discussion.
Depends on the rise of COVID.
Yeah, I would, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I would like to, let's get back to normalcy, but also leave the WebEx link as an option, as an option and as a hybrid, so to speak, to provide more of a way for our constituents to voice their concerns. Maybe put a limit on the web link side, or I like us to find some type of way to find a hybrid solution for them.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Jones?
I'd like to go back to normal.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Bellucci, then Mr. Tower.
Mayor Dyer, I just think that, as Mrs. Henley pointed out, COVID rates are on the rise. And while we may feel comfortable being here and that some people may be comfortable being here, not everyone who has an application before us may be in a position where they're comfortable. And I think it's our duty to provide that alternative option.
Okay. Mr. Tower?
I agree with Mr. Bellucci.
Okay. Pardon?
Can we, I respect the concern about it being kind of inconvenient and feeling disjointed from our regular meeting. Perhaps our communications team could put together some kind of an educational piece that can be sent to the recipients who are planning on attending virtually, so that we maybe at least give them the opportunity to understand how the software works. So, maybe it could be just a quick little 2-minute video like, hey, when you get on the WebEx, we're not going to tell you to speak. You're just going to go ahead and go. And, I think that part of the confusion is that when they get on they're used to that two-way call, and it's really not a two-way call. So maybe we can mitigate some of that. But I agree. I think we're going to be seeing a rebound of COVID, and I think we should plan to have that as a tool in our toolbox, so to speak.
Would it be a good idea to revisit this in
August? It's completely, I just need direction. I will tell you, though, that my staff, every call we get, we let them know exactly how they need to sign up and how this will work. Unfortunately, we can't control the other side of their technology. So if their technology fails, those kinds of things happen. It's totally out of our hands. But the ladies in my office have done a fantastic job, and I really appreciate all the efforts for them to learn how to do it, and then to explain it to the citizens applicants that are calling in to register.
Okay, Mr. Rouse and Mr. Moss.
My last, I don't know if we got direction. I don't want to move on before we get direction on that.
Okay.
Mine is relative to that. I just think we need a disclosure statement, because I know we are rehearing an issue because someone's technology, though they were on the phone, that was not, they weren't present, they were here, they just didn't communicate, didn't speak, that there's some kind of, they get an official notice if they're the applicant, and that's how they plan on participating, that, the council will decide on the body that's before us, and if their technology doesn't work or they don't speak up, that, we don't have this reconsideration because it didn't work. They've decided at their own risk to be that way, and that council may act. So they're just got a warning that doesn't, I don't want to keep running into what we did before, and next thing you know, we're hearing, and other people show up here in person to comment on it, but because they can't make we reschedule. If they're the applicant, they choose that method, their end doesn't work, that we still may decide, and that they're not entitled to, nor should they expect to get a second shot at coming before us.
Okay, so maybe just, keep it going.
So maybe with the planning staff, the planners, I know, send out email notification and communication with the applicants, giving them all the information. maybe that piece could be included from the planners to the applicants to let them know that?
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Moss, yes, we can notify the applicants. We tend to encourage them to be present to avoid those, but again, as we've been in this situation, people have chosen to participate in that manner. So we will continue to emphasize and maybe add a line, as you've suggested, that it can still be heard.
It's that 16-font bold type, so people can't claim they didn't see it.
Understand, yes, sir.
So what do you think? We, revisit this in August?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll keep it going as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Raffs.
Mr. Mayor, the last item, before we get into move on, is I wanted to bring up a discussion on the resolution to establish a CVB community task force to evaluate the transitioning the conventions and business bureaus for new organizational structure. I don't have a problem with the resolution. My only addition would be if we make two maybe people from our community in sports marketing as the area of concern. As a former professional athlete, I mean, it's a billion-dollar industry. We spent $68 million on the sports center down there that's going to hopefully get our convention center hotel and build up, keep our hotels full and whatnot. I would just like to see that as an area of focus as well when we structure this community organization.
Okay.
So we can amend.
Yeah, good suggestion. We can bring that up, at the time. Okay. All righty. Now, that was a great discussion, Hall. That was good stuff. Any liaison reports at all?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would just say the Resort Area Commission has met a couple of times, once in June and once in July, and they continue, and I think these 4th of July observations that I saw people made continue to emphasize the importance of the RACEAP plan's call to establish a resort area management office and to fund it in a way that will improve the look and feel of the oceanfront. It really needs some work, and that's pretty obvious if you go down there. And I hope we'll get a chance to look at, as we get to budget adjustments, to see where we are with that. If we're in council comments,
Okay, we're on council comments now.
Okay, I would just point out, I just saw in a recent Richmond Times-Dispatch, the city of Richmond headline is Airbnbs are now legal and regulated in Richmond. If you read the article, they're going to be regulated. They're not. There's still a lot of unregulated ones right now. But the interesting thing was the short-term rental regulation that Richmond has adopted after several years of study limits the short-term rentals to rental units that either in a home on the property or a separate building on the homeowner's property. But the homeowner has to live there 185 days a year. That's the only way you can get a legal short-term rental in Richmond, which is interesting to me because that's kind of what we did when we passed the resolution that I introduced about just restricting it to the old beach district, but offering the opportunity for other districts to add on in some way. It was not submitted to a vote of any neighborhood. That's across the board, every area of Richmond, some of which are completely divorced from any kind of tourism, some of which are intensely tourism areas of interest to tourists. So I just thought it was interesting, and I think we ought to continue to look at that as a possible regulation.
Thank you. Any other council comments? Mr. Moss.
I just wanted to compliment Mr. Leahy on the memo that he sent us on how the staff came together to identify the specific FTEs that were only generically identified in our budget reconciliation process. I don't think that was a result that any of us wanted to go to, but hard choices had to be made. But I did want to compliment them on how they went about that and the nature and the detail in the memo that he sent us. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, about the agenda review, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Okay, let me go through this. Now, Mr. Moss, you wanted to hear item 10.
I want to pull item 1A and item 10,
Okay?
and I want to vote,
Well, okay.
okay.
Let's just make sure. Does anybody else want to pull any of these before we talk about what's on consent? Now, Mr. Berlucci, item 2 is going to be as revised, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's it. Okay, so I'm sorry.
Item 4 revised.
I'm sorry?
Item 4.
Okay, so item 4 is revised. There'd be a bullet under paragraph 3. Did you say 2 representatives with sports marketing expertise? Okay, so we'll add that in there on item 4.
That was a good idea, Aaron.
Okay, revised with 2 reps. Okay. And Mr. Moss?
Yes, I want to abstain on item 3. I haven't been able to do sufficient research enough to see whether Dominion Resources has a vested interest in Columbia Gas of Virginia, Inc.
Okay.
So I'd rather play it safe than sorry. Abstaining on that. I'll need a letter, Mr. Stiles, for the record afterwards. Thank you. I want to vote no on 4. I'll explain my vote no on number 5. And on items.
I'm sorry. So no on 4, no on 5?
Correct. And on item 6, consistent with my vote a year ago, voting no on 6A, voting no on 6B, voting yes on 6C, voting no on 6D, and voting yes on 6E.
Okay, so you're voting no on A, B, and D.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else under ordinances, resolutions? Yes, ma'am.
For number 6, I guess it's more of a comment or consideration. I'm trying to reconcile how I can vote on this compensation when I guess the 2 or 5% for regular staff was delayed until January. So I'm having a hard time.
Well, they're
kinda-
zeroed out. They're not getting anything new.
So this, you saying number 6 is,
They're all staying where they were last year.
Reauthorization of the prior
I thought
pay
there
of
was,
last year.
reading the information, there was a
Nope.
more
Zero.
No new
included.
increase.
So it's nothing new?
Nope, they're staying the same as they were last year.
Okay.
The only one that's technically, I think, a little bit more is
I thought
Mr.
somebody,
Leahy,
I thought it
because-
was maybe acting the number A, there was an increase. I thought I
Well,
did see that.
No, he got that because when he took the acting job, I think there was a 10% bump after so many, which is what happens. And Mr. Chandler can probably educate me on this, but after you've been in an acting position, whereas I think is it 30 days or something, you get the 10% bump?
Yes, sir, that would be normal city policy, but we're talking about council appointees, so I'm not absolutely sure on that. Yeah, if it was the
Okay,
council's
for-
design, it should be.
For Mr. Leahy, it doesn't really matter because he's going to have 13 days or so of this.
Perhaps I'll go back and read that, but I just wanted to make sure I wasn't approving any increases when the overall staff had not received an increase and
No,
they've been
no.
delayed. Okay.
Okay.
I want to vote no on 1C.
1C.
Was that 1C?
Yes.
Thank you.
What?
1C, she's voting no. That's the motorized trolleys.
Okay.
Scooters.
Anybody else?
Scooters, excuse me.
Okay.
Okay, under planning, Timothy Handlin, short-term rental, 4504 Ocean View Avenue, Bayside District.
I would need to pull it.
Okay, we'll hear this one. Number 2, BQ Ventures LLC, conditional use permit for short-term rental at 406 23rd Street in the Beach District.
Okay.
That's
I'll be
consent.
voting no on all of the short-term
Okay,
rentals.
okay,
So will I.
Give me a second here.
Same reasons I've given other times.
So, were you voting no on this one, Mr. Jones, or
I'm voting on,
we're on number 2 now?
you're on number 2, yeah, I'm voting no on it. Yeah.
Okay, item 3, there's a speaker on that in opposition, so we'll hear that one. And that's 518 14th Street, Beach District. Number 4, Kathleen Page Simmons and Grant Simmons, short-term rental at 3608 DuPont Circle in the Bayside District.
We're going to hear that.
Item 5, Creekside Getaway LLC, Daisy Jade, for conditional use permit, rate short-term rental, 3214 Creekside Drive, Rose Hall.
I'll recommend approval. I'd like to make a comment.
Okay. I'm going to vote no on that one.
I'm going to vote no.
I'm voting no on that, too.
I'm also voting no.
That is if we pull.
Well, then pull it.
Do you want to pull, well, because you've got 5 no's already.
Yeah, then let's.
All right, we'll hear it then. Okay, item 6, Christopher J. Massaro, Revocable Trust, short-term rental, 209 55th Street, Glen Haven District. I'm fine with it, I assume. No, no, and no? Okay. I don't mean to be flip, I'm just, have to write it down so I don't forget here. Okay, Nick Trebon for conditional use permit, short-term rental, 421 21st and a half Street, Unit D, District 6, Beach District.
Okay.
That's good, yes? Okay, and same no for the, y'all three?
Okey-doke.
Okay. Okay, so just to be clear, under ordinances and resolution, item 1A, we're hearing.
And 10.
Item 10, we're hearing. Under planning, items 1, 3, 4, and 5, we're hearing. Is that correct? Anybody? 1, 3, 4, and 5 under planning. And then 1A and 10 under ordinances and resolutions. Okay?
Okay, great. Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions of the open meeting allowed by Section 2.23711A, Code of Virginia, as amended for the following purpose. Legal matters. Consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing is an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body. 1, Donald L. Belton versus William J. Bauer et al., and Latasha Holloway and Georgia Allen versus City of Virginia Beach. And then also personnel matters. Discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body pursuant to Section 2.23711A1. Council appointments, council boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, and appointees. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Berlucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
11-0.
Okay, we are recessed into executive.